The dog lunged the moment he entered the veterinary hospital. Not at the walls, not at the equipment, not even at the veterinarian reaching for a tranquilizer. He went straight for the nearest technician in blue scrubs. A metal tray crashed onto the floor. Someone shouted. A receptionist ducked behind the counter. One in turn nearly ran into a supply closet trying to get away. For a few terrifying seconds, nobody knew what would happen next. Because Rocky wasn't an ordinary dog. He was a retired military canine. A dog trained to detect threats before humans even knew they existed. A dog that had spent years in combat zones protecting soldiers. And now, standing in the middle of Riverstone Veterinary Medical Center in Bozeman, Montana, he looked ready to attack. Then something strange happened. Rocky stopped. Not because of the veterinarian. Not because of his handler, former Army Ranger Daniel Hayes. And not because of the sedative waiting inside a syringe. He stopped because of her. A quiet nurse named Mia Carter. The woman standing at the end of the hallway wearing faded scrubs and tired eyes. The woman nobody paid much attention to. She didn't move. She didn't speak. She didn't even raise her hands. And somehow, the most dangerous dog in the building walked past everyone else and sat down beside her. As if he already knew her. As if he had been looking for her. Daniel felt a chill run down his spine. Because Rocky trusted nobody except him. Nobody. Yet within seconds, the dog had chosen Mia. What Daniel didn't know was that Rocky's arrival would uncover a devastating secret hidden inside military records, expose a corruption scandal that stretched across multiple states, and force a woman who had spent 3 years hiding from her past to face it once again. If you've ever been underestimated, overlooked, or told that one person can't make a difference, stay with me until the end of this story. And before we begin, tell me in the comments what city you're watching from. I'd love to see how far Rocky's story travels. A cold October wind swept across Bozeman, Montana, carrying the scent of wet pine and distant snow. Thick gray clouds covered the mountains, and the morning felt quieter than usual, as if the day were holding its breath for something nobody could yet see. Riverstone Veterinary Medical Center stood on the eastern edge of town, a large brick building that had become a lifeline for pet owners across Gallatin County. Every day brought its own emergencies. Dogs hit by cars. Horses injured on ranches, cats that had swallowed things they never should have touched. The staff had seen almost everything. Or at least they thought they had. Inside the emergency wing, Mia Carter moved through the hallway with a clipboard tucked beneath one arm. At 32 years old, she looked younger than she actually was, though the faint lines near her eyes hinted at experiences most people her age had never faced. She stood 5'7" with a lean athletic build. Her chestnut brown hair was tied back into a practical ponytail, and a few loose strands always escaped no matter how carefully she fixed it. Her skin carried a light golden tone from years spent outdoors, and her gray-blue eyes seemed to notice details that others missed. Most people described Mia as quiet. Some described her as distant. Neither description bothered her. She had spent most of her life learning that attention often brought trouble. The less people noticed her, the better. At least that was what she told herself. 3 years earlier, Mia had arrived in Bozeman with 2 suitcases, a used pickup truck, and absolutely no intention of staying long. She had planned to work for a year, save money, and move somewhere else. Then 1 year became 2. 2 became 3. And somehow Riverstone had become the closest thing to a home she had known in a very long time. Nobody at the clinic knew much about her past. That wasn't an accident. Whenever conversations drifted toward family history or previous jobs, Mia had an almost supernatural ability to redirect the discussion. People eventually stopped asking. Across the reception area, 24-year-old Emily Foster waved enthusiastically at a customer carrying a beagle. Emily possessed enough energy for 3 people. She was short, blonde, constantly smiling, and believed every problem in life could be improved with kindness and coffee. The beagle immediately began barking. Emily laughed. The owner apologized. The dog barked louder. Just another normal morning. Dr. Samuel Brooks emerged from an examination room, carrying a tablet. At 58 years old, he had become something of a local legend among pet owners. His silver hair, weathered face, and calm blue eyes gave him the appearance of a man who had already solved every crisis before it happened. He noticed Mia reviewing charts. "Everything quiet today?" he asked. Mia glanced up. "Give it 10 minutes. Samuel laughed. I should know better than to ask. Neither of them realized how accurate her answer would be. At exactly 8:17 a.m., a sound rolled across the parking lot. A diesel engine. Heavy, powerful, different. Mia's eyes lifted toward the front windows. The vehicle hadn't even stopped yet, but something about the sound caught her attention. Outside, a black Ford pickup pulled into the emergency loading area. The truck looked clean but heavily used. The kind of vehicle owned by someone who spent more time driving across rough terrain than city streets. The driver's door opened. A man stepped out. Even from 50 feet away, Mia recognized military posture immediately. Years could pass. Uniforms could disappear. Hair could gray. But certain habits never left. The man moved like someone who had spent years evaluating threats before entering a room. Daniel Hayes was 41 years old. Tall, broad-shouldered, built more from years of hard work than from gym memberships. His dark hair showed streaks of gray near his temples, and a scar crossed the right side of his jaw. It wasn't dramatic enough to attract attention, but it was impossible to miss once noticed. His face carried a permanent seriousness that made strangers think he was unfriendly. The truth was simpler. Daniel had spent too many years seeing difficult things. Those experiences had stripped away his patience for nonsense, but they had never touched his kindness. People who knew him trusted him completely. The problem was that very few people ever got close enough to know him. Daniel walked around the truck and opened the rear door. The dog stepped out. Everything changed. The German Shepherd was enormous. 90 pounds of muscle, discipline, and instinct. His coat was black and dark gray with patches of tan around the chest and legs. Age had added small streaks of silver around his muzzle. His name was Rocky, 8 years old, retired military working dog. For 6 years, Rocky had served beside Daniel during overseas deployments. Explosive detection, tracking, search operations, protection. The dog had saved lives, Daniel's included, twice. Neither of them talked about those moments. One didn't need words when trust had already been forged under fire. The moment Rocky's paws touched the pavement, his body language changed. His ears lifted. His posture stiffened. His eyes began moving, scanning, calculating, assessing. The hospital instantly became a map of possible threats. Daniel noticed it. That worried him. Rocky hadn't behaved like this in months. The dog followed Daniel through the front doors. 3 seconds later, chaos erupted. A veterinary technician carrying medication froze when Rocky locked onto her movement. A supply cart crashed into a wall. Someone shouted. Another employee stepped backward too quickly and nearly fell. Rocky's head snapped from target to target. Every motion, every sound, every person. His training was taking over. Not aggression, assessment. But nobody else understood the difference. Emily appeared behind the reception desk. Oh wow. That was all she managed. The shepherd's gaze landed on her. A low growl emerged from deep within his chest. The sound instantly silenced the room. Not because it was loud, because it wasn't. It was controlled. The kind of growl that promised consequences if ignored. Daniel tightened the leash. Easy. Rocky didn't relax. Dr. Brooks stepped forward cautiously. His experience told him exactly what he was looking at. This wasn't a dangerous dog. This was a dog that believed danger might be present. Big difference. Unfortunately, both situations looked identical to everyone else. We can help him, Samuel said calmly. Daniel nodded. He started limping a few weeks ago. Samuel's eyes shifted toward Rocky's stance. I can see that. He doesn't like strangers. I can also see that. Daniel almost smiled. Almost. Rocky's gaze continued moving, then suddenly stopped. The dog's ears shifted. His body froze. Daniel followed his line of sight. Mia stood near the hallway entrance holding a clipboard. Nothing more. She wasn't moving, wasn't staring, wasn't speaking. She simply existed. Yet Rocky couldn't look away. The room seemed to slow. Mia felt the shepherd's eyes on her. Something deep inside her tightened. Not fear. Recognition. The feeling arrived so quickly it startled her. Rocky wasn't looking at her the way nervous dogs looked at strangers. He was looking at her the way working dogs looked at people they were trying to identify. That realization sent an uncomfortable memory flashing through her mind. Metal kennels, military compounds, handlers in tactical gear, dogs recovering from injuries. She pushed the memory away immediately. The past belonged in the past. Rocky took one step toward her. Daniel frowned. That wasn't normal. Rocky took another step. And another. The entire emergency wing watched. Nobody spoke. Nobody moved. Mia slowly crouched. Not toward the dog. Not away from him. Neutral. Relaxed. Sideways posture. No direct eye contact. No challenge. No pressure. Several employees looked confused. Daniel looked shocked. Because she was doing everything exactly right. Not by accident. By experience. Rocky stopped 2 feet away. The shepherd lowered his nose. He sniffed her hand. Then her sleeve. Then her shoulder. The dog remained perfectly still. So did Mia. Daniel could hardly believe what he was seeing. For years, Rocky had refused contact from almost everyone outside a very small circle of trusted individuals. Veterinarians. Handlers. A few military personnel. That was it. Yet this woman had known him less than 30 seconds. Rocky took another breath. Then sat beside her. Just sat. As naturally as if he had done it 1,000 times before. The room exploded with whispers. What just happened? Did you see that? How did she do that? Emily looked genuinely amazed. Dr. Brooks looked fascinated. Daniel simply stared. Because Rocky wasn't merely tolerating Mia. He trusted her. The shepherd leaned his shoulder gently against her leg. A tiny gesture. Almost invisible. But Daniel knew exactly what it meant. Rocky only did that with people he considered safe. Mia carefully rested one hand against the dog's neck. Immediately she felt it. The tension. The fatigue. The discomfort hidden beneath years of training. Her eyes narrowed slightly. Something wasn't right. Rocky's breathing changed when he shifted weight. His left rear leg compensated for movement. The adjustment was subtle. Most people would never notice it. Mia noticed instantly. Because she had seen it before. Far too many times. Rocky wasn't simply limping. He was hiding pain. Significant pain. The kind working dogs often concealed until they physically couldn't anymore. Daniel saw something change in her expression. Concern. Real concern. Not the polite concern professionals displayed for clients. Something deeper. What is it? He asked. Mia didn't answer immediately. Her hand remained on Rocky's shoulder. The shepherd closed his eyes for half a second. Trust. Complete trust. Daniel felt another chill. That wasn't normal. Nothing about this situation was normal. How long has he been limping? Mia finally asked. A few weeks. Her gaze remained fixed on Rocky. Maybe longer. Daniel frowned. What do you mean? Mia gently watched Rocky shift his weight again. The dog was protecting something. Compensating. Adapting. Exactly the way highly trained military dogs often did. Daniel noticed the way she studied him. Not like a veterinary nurse. Like someone who already understood military working animals. Very well. Too well. For the first time since entering the hospital, Daniel stopped focusing on Rocky and started focusing on Mia. Who exactly was this woman? Because the dog who trusted nobody had just chosen her. And somehow, deep down, Daniel had the strange feeling that Rocky knew something he didn't. The question lingered in his mind as he watched Mia kneeling beside the shepherd. For the first time that morning, Daniel Hayes wondered who Mia Carter really was. The emergency wing slowly returned to life, but the atmosphere had changed. People tried to continue working. They answered phones, checked charts, prepared treatment rooms. Yet every few minutes someone glanced toward the hallway where Rocky remained seated beside Mia Carter. Nobody could quite understand what they had witnessed. Neither could Daniel Hayes. For nearly 6 years, Rocky had worked alongside military personnel, veterinarians, trainers, and handlers. The shepherd tolerated people when necessary, but trust was something entirely different. Trust had to be earned, and Rocky did not hand it out freely. Yet somehow, within less than a minute, the giant military dog had chosen Mia. Daniel stood quietly watching. The old soldier inside him had learned long ago that unusual events deserved attention. And this was definitely unusual. Mia slowly rose from her crouched position. Rocky immediately stood with her. Not because she commanded him. Not because she pulled his leash. Simply because he wanted to. The reaction caused another round of confused looks from the staff. Emily Foster appeared beside Dr. Brooks. Is that normal? She whispered. Samuel folded his arms. No. Should we be worried? No. Should we be confused? Absolutely. Emily nodded. Good. Because I'm very confused. For the first time that morning, Daniel almost laughed. Almost. Mia placed one hand gently against Rocky's shoulder. The shepherd immediately relaxed. His ears lowered slightly. The tension in his body softened. Daniel noticed it instantly. The dog looked exhausted. Not physically tired. Something deeper. The kind of exhaustion that comes from carrying pain too long. Mia noticed it too. In fact, the more she observed Rocky, the more concerned she became. The dog moved carefully, too carefully. Every adjustment seemed calculated. Every shift in posture appeared deliberate. His body language reminded her of something she hadn't seen in years. Military working dogs recovering from deployment injuries. Dogs trained so thoroughly that they would continue performing long after their bodies should have stopped. The realization sent an uncomfortable sensation through her chest. She didn't like where her thoughts were heading. Not at all. "Let's get him into exam room 4, Dr. Brooks said. Daniel nodded. The moment he started walking, Rocky followed. But halfway down the hallway, the shepherd stopped, turned around, and looked directly at Mia. The dog wouldn't move. Daniel stopped. So now what? Emily covered her mouth to hide a smile. The giant military dog was essentially refusing to continue unless Mia came too. Mia sighed softly. "I'll walk with him." Rocky immediately resumed moving. The entire staff stared. Daniel stared hardest of all. Inside exam room 4, Rocky settled onto the floor near the examination table. The room itself was simple. White walls, steel cabinets, medical equipment, bright overhead lights. Normally dogs disliked the environment. Rocky ignored it completely. His attention remained fixed on Mia. Daniel sat in a nearby chair. As he watched the interaction, old memories surfaced. Years earlier, during a deployment overseas, Rocky had behaved similarly with one particular military medic, a woman who specialized in treating working dogs. The shepherd had trusted her instantly. Something about Mia reminded him of that memory. The thought bothered him, because that medic had possessed years of specialized military training. Mia was supposedly a veterinary nurse in Montana. The two things shouldn't overlap, yet somehow they did. Mia knelt beside Rocky and began observing him more closely. The shepherd remained perfectly still. No resistance, no warning signals, nothing. Her fingers moved carefully along his spine, shoulders, hip alignment, muscle structure. Daniel's eyes narrowed. Most veterinary nurses didn't perform assessments that way. They simply didn't. Mia's movements looked practiced, professional, experienced, as if she had performed the exact same examination hundreds of times. She stopped near Rocky's left hip. The shepherd tensed. Barely. Most people wouldn't have noticed. Mia did. So did Daniel. "There," she said quietly. Dr. Brooks looked up. "You found something?" "I think so." Daniel leaned forward. "What is it?" Mia hesitated. Not because she lacked confidence. Because she was thinking. Carefully. The way people think when they don't like their own conclusions. "I'm not sure yet." Daniel frowned. "That's not an answer. It's the only honest one I have." Dr. Brooks nodded approvingly. He appreciated honesty, especially in medicine. Mia continued examining Rocky. Her concern deepened. The dog wasn't merely favoring one leg. His entire posture had adapted around a chronic injury. That didn't happen overnight. That took time. Weeks. Months. Possibly longer. She gently rubbed behind Rocky's ear. The shepherd closed his eyes briefly. Trust. Complete trust. Daniel watched in silence. The sight made no sense. And the more he watched, the less sense it made. Mia looked nothing like the military handlers he remembered. She wasn't physically intimidating. She wasn't loud. She didn't project authority. If anything, she seemed easy to overlook. Yet Rocky clearly saw something different. Something nobody else could see. The thought stayed with him. Because military dogs were often better judges of character than people. Much better. "What was your previous job?" Daniel asked suddenly. The room became quiet. Mia froze. Only for a second. But Daniel caught it. So did Dr. Brooks. Mia recovered instantly. "I've had several jobs." Daniel wasn't fooled. "So have I." Their eyes met. For a brief moment something passed between them. Recognition. Not of identity. Of experience. The recognition that comes when two people realize the other has survived difficult things. Mia looked away first. "I worked at a few clinics before coming here." "A few clinics." "That's right." Daniel nodded slowly. He knew deflection when he heard it. And that was definitely deflection. The conversation ended. But the question remained. An hour later, Rocky underwent preliminary evaluation. The shepherd cooperated with everything. Blood pressure, temperature, basic mobility tests. Every procedure became easier when Mia remained nearby. At one point, she stepped out of the room. Rocky immediately became restless. Not aggressive. Concerned. Watching the doorway. Waiting. The moment she returned, he settled again. Even Dr. Brooks found it remarkable. "I've never seen anything quite like this." Daniel rubbed the back of his neck. Neither have I. The veterinarian studied Rocky thoughtfully. Then he studied Mia. Then Rocky again. Finally, he smiled. Whatever this is, I'm glad it happened. Mia wasn't sure she agreed. The situation made her uncomfortable, because the longer she spent around Rocky, the stronger the feeling became. The feeling that she recognized the dog, which was impossible, absolutely impossible. She had never met Rocky. At least she didn't think she had. Yet tiny details kept bothering her. The way he responded to hand signals, the specific commands he seemed to anticipate, the training methods reflected in his behavior. Everything pointed toward a very specific background, a background Mia knew far too well. She pushed the thought aside, focused on work, focused on facts. Facts were safer than memories. Outside the examination room, Emily and two technicians quietly discussed what they had witnessed. I think she's secretly a dog whisperer. One technician laughed. That's your theory? It's better than yours. My theory is that dog knows something. Emily pointed dramatically. Exactly. What? I don't know. Neither of them realized how close they might eventually be. Back inside the room, Daniel knelt beside Rocky. The shepherd rested his head against Daniel's leg. A familiar gesture. One that instantly softened the veteran's expression. People who didn't know Daniel often assumed he lacked warmth. Rocky knew better. The dog had witnessed the real man, the loyal man, the compassionate man, the man who had once carried a wounded military dog nearly 2 miles through dangerous terrain because leaving him behind wasn't an option. Daniel gently scratched Rocky's neck. The shepherd's tail moved once. Slowly, Daniel smiled, then looked toward Mia. She stood reviewing notes near the counter. Quiet, focused, professional, and hiding something. The certainty hit him unexpectedly. Not something dangerous, not something criminal, something painful, something she preferred buried. Daniel recognized that too, because he carried a few buried things himself. Most veterans did. Mia suddenly looked up. For a split second their eyes met again. Neither spoke. Neither needed to. The silence carried enough questions already. Dr. Brooks eventually closed the chart. We'll need imaging. Daniel nodded. I figured. The veterinarian glanced toward Mia. What do you think? The question surprised everyone, including Mia. Samuel rarely asked for opinions unless he valued them, and he clearly valued hers. Mia looked at Rocky, then at Daniel, then back at the dog. I think he's been hurting longer than anyone realizes. Daniel felt something tighten inside his chest. The words landed harder than expected, because deep down he had already started wondering the same thing. What makes you think that? Mia watched Rocky shift his weight again. The subtle compensation, the careful adjustment, the hidden discomfort, all of it. Experience. The answer slipped out before she could stop it. Daniel immediately noticed. So did Dr. Brooks. Mia realized her mistake. Too late. Daniel leaned back slowly. What kind of experience? Silence. The room waited. Mia's heart beat slightly faster. Not from fear. From memory. Dangerous memory. The kind she had spent years avoiding. Finally, she forced a small smile. The kind that teaches you to pay attention. Daniel knew another deflection when he heard one. And now he was absolutely certain. Mia Carter wasn't simply a veterinary nurse. There was a story behind her. A significant one. Rocky seemed to know it. Perhaps even before Daniel did. The shepherd slowly lifted his head. His eyes moved from Mia to Daniel and back again. Watching both of them. As if waiting. As if recognizing something neither human had fully understood yet. Outside, snow began falling lightly over Bozeman. The first snow of the season. Inside Riverstone Veterinary Medical Center, nobody realized that Rocky's arrival had already set larger events into motion. A hidden injury, a mysterious past, a bond that shouldn't exist, and questions that would soon demand answers. For now, however, only one fact mattered. The dog who trusted nobody had chosen Mia Carter, and Daniel Hayes could not stop wondering why. Rocky did not want the examination table. That became clear within the first 10 seconds. The moment Dr. Samuel Brooks reached for the hydraulic control beside the steel table, Rocky lifted his head and gave the old veterinarian a look that made the room seem suddenly smaller. It was not a growl. It was not an attack warning. It was something quieter and much more intelligent. The look of a dog who had spent his life measuring danger and had already decided that high metal surfaces, bright lights, and too many hands near his injured body did not deserve his trust. Samuel stopped immediately. He was too experienced to confuse obedience with consent, and too kind to force an animal when another way might exist. His silver brows drew together, not in frustration, but in thought. "All right," he said softly. "We do this his way first." Mia Carter stood near Rocky's left shoulder, one hand resting lightly against the thick fur at the base of his neck. She felt the tension roll through him like distant thunder beneath skin and muscle. Rocky was trying to be still for her. That was what troubled her most. The dog was not calm because he felt safe. He was calm because he had chosen someone in the room and was forcing himself to endure the rest. Mia knew that kind of discipline. She had seen dogs hold it through wounds, through transport, through recovery cages, through moments when lesser creatures would have screamed with their whole bodies. Working dogs did not complain the way ordinary animals did. They adapted. They disguised pain. They kept the mission alive even after the mission had ended. Daniel Hayes stood at the foot of the room with his arms crossed, but the pose fooled no one who knew how to read him. His shoulders were stiff. His jaw was locked. His dark eyes kept moving from Rocky to Mia and back again. Daniel was a man built for control, a man who had carried command decisions through deserts, ruined roads, and nights that never ended cleanly. But this room had taken that control away from him. Here, under bright veterinary lights in Bozeman, Montana, he was no longer a handler guiding a military K-9 through danger. He was simply a man watching his oldest friend hurt and realizing he might not have understood how long that hurt had existed. That thought sat in him like a stone. He had noticed Rocky slowing down, yes. He had noticed the hesitation before stairs, the careful way the dog lowered himself beside the couch, the strange reluctance to jump into the truck unless Daniel lifted him. But he had explained those things away. Age, retirement, cold weather, old fatigue. He had told himself Rocky had earned the right to move slower. The possibility that Rocky had been hiding something worse had never fully formed in his mind until Mia looked at the dog with that quiet sorrow in her eyes. "We'll start on the floor," Mia said. Her voice was low, steady, and oddly familiar to Rocky. Daniel heard it too, though he could not have explained why it made the air change. Mia lowered herself slowly beside the shepherd, keeping her body turned at an angle so Rocky never felt crowded. She did not fuss over him. She did not coo. She did not make the mistake of treating him like a frightened puppy. She spoke to him as if he were a soldier who had earned respect. "Easy, Rocky. No one's rushing you." The dog exhaled through his nose. His ears shifted back, then forward. Mia slid one hand along his ribs, feeling for guarding, tension, and compensation. Her fingers were gentle but precise. She mapped his body the way a cartographer maps difficult country, not guessing, not assuming. Samuel watched her from beside the counter with growing interest. He had hired Mia 3 years earlier after she came recommended by a small clinic in Wyoming, but even then, parts of her history had been politely vague. She had references. She had certifications. She worked hard, stayed late, never complained, and seemed to possess an instinct for injured animals that bordered on uncanny. Samuel had never pushed for more. He believed people deserved the dignity of leaving some doors closed. But now, watching her with Rocky, he wondered whether he had mistaken closed doors for empty rooms. Emily Foster hovered near the doorway with a towel folded over her arm, pretending to be useful. Her blonde hair was pinned back with a clip shaped like a sunflower, and her round face was still pale from the moment Rocky had entered the building. Emily was warm-hearted, impulsive, and terrible at hiding curiosity. She admired Mia deeply, though she rarely admitted it directly. To Emily, Mia seemed like the sort of woman who carried storms in her pockets and somehow still remembered to feed every stray cat behind the building. "Do you need anything?" Emily asked. Mia did not look away from Rocky. "Dim the overhead light." Emily obeyed instantly, grateful to have a task. The room softened. Rocky's breathing slowed slightly. Daniel noticed that too. Mia Carter was not guessing. She was managing the room the way one managed a high-stress recovery environment. Light, sound, distance, pressure, all of it mattered. Daniel had seen medics do the same with wounded soldiers and injured working dogs in places where the wrong kind of noise could turn pain into panic. His suspicion deepened, but he kept silent. Mia reached the left hip and paused. It was almost nothing. A tiny tightening beneath her fingers. A shift in Rocky's weight. A controlled breath. But to Mia, it was louder than a bark. She moved away, waited, then returned to the same area from a slightly different angle. Rocky did it again. His body betrayed what his training refused to show. Mia's throat tightened. Not enough for anyone else to notice, but enough that she had to swallow before speaking. "He's guarding the left hip," she said. Samuel nodded and moved closer, careful not to crowd. "Muscle strain?" Daniel asked. He wanted the answer to be simple. Wanted it with the desperate discipline of a man who had survived too many complicated truths. Mia did not give him comfort. Not false comfort. "Maybe," she said. "But his pelvis is compensating. See how he keeps loading more weight on the right rear leg. That's not something a dog starts doing yesterday. That kind of pattern takes time." Daniel looked down at Rocky. The shepherd stood still, proud and silent, his muzzle silvered with age, his eyes still aware of everyone in the room. Daniel suddenly remembered Rocky at 3 years old, leaping over a collapsed wall with effortless power, landing in dust, turning back as if asking why the humans were always so slow. That dog had seemed indestructible, a creature carved from loyalty and fire. The dog before him was still Rocky, still noble, still watchful. But beneath that nobility was a hidden cost Daniel had not seen. Samuel opened a cabinet and pulled out a radiology request sheet. "Full pelvic series," he said. "Both hips. Multiple views." Mia looked up sharply. "And lower spine if we can get it without stressing him." Samuel met her eyes and nodded. "Agreed." Daniel glanced between them. "You think it's serious?" It was not a question. Mia's hand remained on Rocky's neck. The dog leaned into it just enough to make Daniel's chest ache. "I think we need to know what we're dealing with." Daniel almost pushed harder. The old part of him wanted a direct assessment, a threat level, a plan. But another part of him, the part that had learned to trust people who stayed calm under pressure, understood that Mia was choosing her words carefully because she did not yet have proof. He respected that, even if it frustrated him. "Do it," he said. The radiology suite at Riverstone sat at the end of a short hallway behind 2 swinging doors. It was not modern in the way glossy city hospitals were modern, but it was clean, organized, and cared for. The walls were painted a pale blue mint to calm clients, though most clients never saw this part of the building. The machine itself was older, a dependable unit with a few scratches on the base and a warning label that had begun peeling at one corner. The technician assigned to imaging that morning was Owen Miller, a thin, nervous man of 29 with sandy hair, wireframe glasses, and the unfortunate habit of smiling whenever he was terrified. Owen was good with equipment and less good with chaos. He had joined Riverstone after deciding that emergency human medicine involved too much shouting. Veterinary emergency medicine, he had learned too late, simply replaced shouting people with animals that had teeth. When Rocky entered the suite, Owen's smile appeared immediately. "That is a very large dog," he said. "Thank you for noticing," Daniel replied dryly. Mia almost smiled, but the expression vanished before it fully formed. Getting Rocky positioned should have been difficult. With most dogs his size, especially one with pain and combat training, sedation would have been the safest option. But sedation carried its own risks, and Mia did not want to dull any pain responses before seeing the first films. So she worked slowly. She allowed Rocky to smell the table, the floor mat, the machine, Owen's gloved hand, and the lead apron hanging from the wall. She gave him time to understand the room. Time, she knew, was sometimes the only mercy a medical professional could offer. Daniel watched her use small gestures, none of them official commands. Yet Rocky responded as if he understood the shape of her intentions. When she guided him onto the padded positioning surface, he hesitated only once. His left leg trembled. Barely. Mia saw it. Daniel saw Mia see it. That was when fear truly entered him. Not panic. Fear. The quiet, adult kind that does not shout because shouting would make it real. Owen prepared the first plate with hands that were steadier than his face. Samuel stood behind the protective barrier reviewing the angles. Emily had been sent away before she could invent a reason to stay. Daniel remained at Rocky's head, one hand near the collar, though Mia was the one Rocky kept watching. "You ever done this before?" Daniel asked quietly. Mia adjusted Rocky's rear leg by less than an inch. "X-rays?" "Yes. That's not what I meant." She paused, then continued working. "I know." Daniel waited. Mia did not answer. The machine hummed. Owen called out a warning. Everyone stepped back to the proper position. The first image captured, then the second, then the third. Each time Rocky held still with a dignity that made the room quieter. By the fourth image, Daniel's hand had settled on Rocky's head, fingers buried in the thick fur between his ears. He remembered sleeping in a transport vehicle with Rocky pressed against his boots. He remembered the dog waking before everyone else when danger approached. He remembered promising, in a half-whisper after one bad night, that if they both made it home, Rocky would never have to work again. Daniel had kept that promise, or thought he had. The images appeared slowly on the monitor in the adjoining review room. At first they were only shapes in black, white, and shadow. Bone, joint, density, structure. Samuel leaned forward. Owen stopped smiling. Mia stood completely still. Daniel did not understand radiographs the way they did, but he understood faces. And the faces in the room changed before anyone spoke. Samuel removed his glasses, wiped them with a cloth, put them back on, and looked again. That small action told Daniel more than any words could have. "What?" Daniel asked. His voice sounded too rough in the small room. Mia did not answer. Her eyes were fixed on the left hip. The fracture line was there, ghostly and terrible, running through the femoral neck with evidence of old remodeling around it. The body had tried to build around failure, tried to survive what had not been repaired. Calcium deposits, irregular edges, chronic adaptation, not a fresh injury, not a simple strain, not a few weeks of discomfort. Samuel exhaled slowly. "Daniel," he said, and the gentleness in his voice made Daniel's stomach tighten. "Rocky has an old fracture in the left hip. A serious one." Daniel stared at the screen. "Old?" Mia finally spoke, her voice quieter than before. "Yes." Daniel shook his head once, not in denial exactly, but because the word could not enter him cleanly. "No." He was cleared before retirement. No one answered. That silence was worse than contradiction. Daniel stepped closer to the monitor. He had a full medical clearance. "I have the papers. They said he was healthy. They said he was fit for retirement placement." Samuel's expression carried the grave sorrow of an honest doctor delivering dishonest news created by someone else. This didn't happen a few weeks ago. Mia's eyes remained on the image. The remodeling suggests this injury has been there a long time, possibly over a year. Daniel looked at Rocky through the glass window, separating the review space from the suite. The shepherd sat calmly on the padded mat, watching the door, waiting for his people, as if the fate of his own body were merely another assignment to endure. Daniel felt something inside him fracture in a place no X-ray could show. "A year," he whispered. The words came out almost silently. "He's been with me for more than a year." Mia turned toward him then. She saw the guilt rising before he had language for it. She had seen that expression on handlers before. Good men who loved their dogs and still missed what the dogs had hidden from them. Good women who replayed every missed sign until memory became a courtroom. She knew what guilt could do if left alone in the dark. But she also knew this was not the moment for comfort that sounded like forgiveness. Daniel did not need a blessing. He needed truth. "Military working dogs are trained to suppress pain responses," she said, "especially around their handler. If Rocky believed he needed to stay strong for you, he would." Daniel looked at her, his eyes bright with something he refused to let fall. "He should have told me." Mia's expression softened. He did, in the only ways he knew how. The hesitation, the slowing down, the careful movements. But he was also trained for years not to make pain the loudest thing in the room. Daniel turned back to the monitor. The image blurred for a second. He blinked hard. He would not break here. Not in front of strangers. Not even in front of Mia, though something about her felt less like a stranger with every passing minute. Samuel cleared his throat gently. "We need the retirement records. All of them. Not just the summary." Daniel nodded, but his focus remained on Rocky. "They said he was fine," he repeated. "I believed them." Mia looked at the fracture again, and a cold thought moved through her. A thought she did not want. A thought that belonged to old files, old names, old complaints no one wanted to hear. This kind of injury did not hide from a proper evaluation. Not if imaging had been done. Not if anyone had looked carefully. She felt the past stir behind her like something waking in a locked room. For 3 years, she had lived quietly in Bozeman, caring for animals, paying rent on a small house near the edge of town, keeping her head down, letting snow and routine cover the woman she used to be. But Rocky's X-ray had cracked that cover wide open. Daniel saw her face change. "What is it?" he asked. Mia took a slow breath. Her answer came carefully, almost reluctantly. "I don't think Rocky's injury was missed because it was subtle." Samuel looked at her. Owen looked at her. Daniel went completely still. Mia kept her eyes on the screen. I think we need to find out who cleared him. For several seconds after Mia spoke, nobody in the review room said a word. The X-ray remained frozen on the monitor. A pale, ghostly image of bone, damage, and time. Evidence. Unarguable evidence. The fracture line cut through the screen like a scar. Daniel Hayes stared at it without blinking. He had spent years looking at intelligence reports, satellite photographs, mission briefings, and battlefield maps. He had learned how to process difficult information quickly because survival often depended on it. But this wasn't a battlefield. This was Rocky. And somehow that made it harder. Far harder. The shepherd sat quietly beyond the glass partition, waiting patiently in the radiology suite. Waiting for permission. Waiting for instructions. Waiting for people he trusted. As if he had done nothing extraordinary. As if he hadn't just revealed that he had been living with severe pain for more than a year. Daniel felt sick. Not physically. Emotionally. The realization kept replaying in his mind. Every staircase Rocky had climbed. Every jump into the truck. Every walk through the snow. Every moment Daniel had assumed age was slowing him down. All of it looked different now. Every memory had changed. How bad is it? He finally asked. Samuel Brooks folded his arms. The veterinarian looked older than he had an hour ago. Not physically. Emotionally. There was something particularly upsetting about seeing loyal animals suffer because of human failures. Veterinarians carried those moments for years. Samuel knew he would carry this one. The fracture itself is serious, he said carefully. But what concerns me most is the length of time. Daniel nodded slowly. More than a year. The number refused to leave his head. A year. Maybe longer. Rocky had trusted him with his life. And Daniel had missed it. Mia watched the veteran carefully. She recognized the signs. The guilt. The self-blame. The endless cycle of what if. She had seen it before. Handlers blamed themselves. Soldiers blamed themselves. Parents blamed themselves. Human beings were remarkably talented at accepting responsibility for things they never had a realistic chance of preventing. The truth rarely stopped them. You didn't cause this, Mia said quietly. Daniel looked up. His eyes were sharp. Not angry. Wounded. Maybe not. Not maybe. He looked away. The monitor reflected faintly in his eyes. You don't understand. Mia's expression softened slightly. Try me. Daniel laughed once. A short, humorless sound. Then he pointed through the glass. That dog saved my life twice. Nobody spoke. Daniel rarely talked about his deployments. The fact that he had volunteered the information at all revealed more than he probably intended. He pulled me out of a collapsed building in Syria. His voice remained steady. Military steady. The kind of steady people used when discussing things that hurt. 3 years later, he detected an explosive device outside a convoy route. A pause. If he hadn't found it, 12 people would have died. Another pause. He never failed me. His jaw tightened. And somehow I failed him. The room became quiet again. Samuel looked down. Owen stared at the floor. Even Mia felt something tighten in her chest. Because Daniel wasn't talking about medicine anymore. He was talking about loyalty. About debt. About love disguised as responsibility. And those things hurt differently. Rocky chose that moment to stand. The shepherd stretched carefully, then limped toward the glass. Not dramatically. Not obviously. Just enough. Just enough for everyone to see it now. Once seen, it could never be unseen. Daniel closed his eyes. Only briefly. When he opened them again, the soldier had returned. Not because the pain disappeared. Because he had decided to function despite it. What do we do next? Samuel appreciated the question. Action was easier than grief. We manage his pain immediately. Daniel nodded. And after that, the veterinarian looked toward Mia. She noticed. So did Daniel. Increasingly, Samuel was treating her like a specialist rather than a nurse. And there was a reason for that. Mia walked closer to the monitor. Her eyes moved across the image again. Studying. Calculating. Comparing. Something felt wrong. Not the fracture. The fracture was obvious. Something else. Something behind it. Something hidden. What retirement organization processed him? She asked. Daniel frowned. What? The retirement paperwork. He shrugged. Military Transition Office. Who performed the final medical clearance? The question hit him oddly. Daniel wasn't sure why. Maybe because Mia asked it with unusual intensity. Maybe because she sounded less like a veterinary nurse and more like an investigator. I don't remember. Try. Daniel thought. The memory surfaced slowly. 14 months earlier. Paperwork. Signatures. Evaluations. Meetings. A long process he had mostly rushed through because he wanted Rocky home. There was a civilian contractor. Mia's eyes narrowed. What contractor? Daniel rubbed the back of his neck. Something assessment group. Name. He thought harder, then suddenly remembered. Patriot Veterinary Assessment Services. The room changed. Nobody else noticed. But Samuel did. Mia froze. Only for half a second. Then recovered. Too quickly. Far too quickly. Samuel had practiced medicine for 30 years. He knew exactly what recognition looked like. And Mia had recognized that name. Daniel saw it too. What? Mia didn't answer immediately, which was answer enough. What do you know? Still silence. Daniel stepped closer. Mia. She looked at him. For the first time all day, uncertainty appeared in her eyes. Not fear. Not exactly. Something older. Something buried. I know the name. Daniel waited. So. Mia looked back toward the monitor. Toward Rocky. Toward the fracture. Toward a past she had spent years avoiding. I came across them before. Daniel folded his arms. Where? Another pause. This one longer. More dangerous. Finally Mia spoke. A previous job. The answer frustrated him immediately. Because it wasn't really an answer. You keep saying that. She met his gaze. Because it's true. No. Daniel shook his head. It's incomplete. Neither of them looked away. The tension grew. Samuel quietly motioned for Owen to leave. The technician disappeared instantly. Nobody stopped him. Mia finally broke eye contact. There were complaints. Daniel frowned. What kind of complaints? She hesitated, then chose her words carefully. Medical discrepancies. Samuel's attention sharpened. Discrepancies? Mia nodded. A few years ago, Daniel felt his pulse quicken. Similar to this. Silence. Then a single word. Maybe. The room became very still. Because everyone knew what maybe meant. Maybe meant yes. Maybe meant she wasn't ready to say it yet. Daniel looked through the glass again. Rocky had settled back onto the floor. Patient. Loyal. Trusting. The same way he always had. The thought made anger stir beneath the grief. Not anger at Rocky. Never Rocky. Anger at whoever had signed paperwork claiming the dog was healthy. Get me the records. Samuel looked up. What? Daniel's voice hardened. The retirement records. Mia stared at him. He looked back. Every page. The former soldier's eyes had changed. The sadness remained. But something else had joined it. Purpose. The same purpose that had carried him through combat zones. The same purpose that had made Rocky trust him. Someone had failed his dog. And Daniel intended to find out who. An hour later they sat in Samuel's office. Outside, snow continued falling. Small white flakes drifted past the windows. Inside, the office smelled faintly of coffee and old books. The retirement documents had arrived electronically. Daniel opened the file. The room fell silent. Page after page appeared. Vaccination records. Behavior assessments. Training history. Medical evaluations. Then finally, the final clearance report. Samuel leaned closer. Mia stood behind him. Daniel began reading. Healthy. Fit for retirement placement. No major orthopedic concerns. No mobility restrictions. Excellent condition. Daniel stared. Then looked toward the x-ray. Then back to the report. Then back again. The contradiction was absurd. Impossible. One of them had to be wrong. And the x-ray wasn't wrong. Samuel adjusted his glasses. Mia. She already knew. The signature. At the bottom. There it was. Printed clearly. Evaluator, Dr. Victor Langford. The name hit her like ice water. For a moment the office disappeared. She wasn't in Montana anymore. She wasn't standing beside Daniel Hayes. She wasn't looking at Rocky's records. She was somewhere else. Years earlier. A different facility. A different life. A meeting room. Complaints. Reports. Arguments. Warnings. And one name appearing over and over again. Victor Langford. Mia's stomach tightened. No. Not possible. Not him. Not again. Samuel noticed her expression immediately. Mia? She didn't answer. Daniel looked up. What is it? Still silence. The office felt smaller. The air heavier. Finally Mia sat down. Slowly. Very slowly. As though her legs had suddenly become uncertain. Daniel's pulse accelerated. What do you know? This time she couldn't deflect. Couldn't change the subject. Couldn't hide behind vague answers. The evidence sat directly in front of her. The name sat directly in front of her. Victor Langford. She closed her eyes briefly. Then opened them. He shouldn't be on that report. Daniel stared. What? He shouldn't be there. Samuel leaned forward. Why? Mia looked at both men. For several seconds, she seemed to be making a decision. A difficult one. Possibly the most difficult decision she'd faced in years. Because once spoken aloud, certain truths could never be buried again. Finally, she exhaled, slowly, carefully, and said the words she had hoped never to say. Because 3 years ago, I filed a complaint against him. The room froze. Daniel felt every muscle in his body tighten. Samuel didn't move. Outside the window, snow continued falling. Inside the office, everything had changed. Because Rocky's injury was no longer just a medical problem. It was becoming something much larger. Something that reached beyond Montana. Beyond one dog. Beyond one report. And for the first time in years, Mia Carter realized that the past she had escaped might have finally found her. The snow had thickened outside Riverstone Veterinary Medical Center, turning the parking lot into a pale, silent field. Inside Dr. Samuel Brooks's office, the air felt heavier than weather. Daniel Hayes sat across from Mia Carter with Rocky's retirement file open between them, and the name at the bottom of the clearance report seemed to burn brighter than every other word on the page. Dr. Victor Langford. Evaluator. Approved. Fit for retirement. No orthopedic concerns. Mia had just said she filed a complaint against him 3 years ago, and once those words entered the room, they did not leave. They settled into the corners like smoke. Samuel remained standing beside the desk, one hand resting on the back of his chair, his silver brows drawn low over his eyes. He was not a suspicious man by nature. Years of veterinary medicine had made him compassionate first and cautious second. But he knew the sound of truth when it arrived reluctantly. Mia had not offered that confession for drama. She had offered it the way a person offers a blade by the handle, carefully, because someone might still get hurt. Daniel's eyes did not move from her face. He had interrogated men before. He had read fear, deception, loyalty, and guilt under worse lights than this. But Mia did not look guilty. She looked like a woman standing at the edge of a grave she had dug for her own past, only to discover something inside was still alive. What kind of complaint? Daniel asked. His voice was controlled, but Rocky, lying on the padded mat near his chair, lifted his head at once. The shepherd knew that tone. He had heard it in vehicles before missions, in dark rooms before doors opened, in quiet moments when human bodies prepared for danger. Mia looked at Rocky first, then at Daniel. Medical discrepancies, she said. Dogs cleared for duty transition or retirement when their physical condition didn't match the paperwork. Daniel's jaw tightened. Like Rocky. Mia did not answer quickly. That alone was answer enough. Possibly, she said at last. I don't know yet. I need to see the full chain. Samuel leaned forward. Mia, were you military? The question landed gently, but it landed. Mia lowered her eyes to the file. For 3 years, she had allowed Riverstone to know only the harmless version of her life. Mia Carter, veterinary nurse. Quiet, reliable, good with difficult animals. No one needed the rest. No one needed Fort Liberty. No one needed the recovery kennels, the night shifts, the reports, the meetings where men in pressed uniforms smiled with their mouths and dismissed her with their signatures. But Rocky's X-ray had reached back across time and pulled that life into the present. She opened her mouth to answer, but before she could, Emily Foster knocked once on the office door and pushed it open halfway. Emily's bright face had lost its usual color. Her sunflower hair clip sat slightly crooked in her blonde hair, and she clutched the doorframe as though it had become suddenly important. Dr. Brooks, she said, there are people here. Samuel frowned. Clients. Emily shook her head. Not exactly. Daniel stood immediately. The motion was fast enough that Samuel noticed. Rocky stood too, slower, favoring the left hip, but still with a quiet readiness that made Mia's chest ache. Emily swallowed. They asked for Mia. No one spoke for a moment. The timing was too precise to feel innocent. Samuel looked at Mia. Daniel looked toward the hallway. Mia's face changed in a way only Daniel seemed to catch. Not surprise. Confirmation. As if some part of her had been expecting the past to arrive wearing shoes and carrying identification. How many? Mia asked. Emily blinked. 3. 2 men and 1 woman. They're in the reception area. The woman has a badge. Daniel's shoulders squared. What agency? I didn't ask, Emily admitted, then added quickly. She looked very official. Not like parking ticket official. More like the kind of official who makes other official people nervous. Under different circumstances, Samuel might have smiled. No one smiled now. Mia stood and smoothed the front of her navy scrubs with both hands, though there was nothing to smooth. It was an old gesture, Daniel realized. Not vanity. Preparation. Armor. She turned toward Samuel. Can Rocky stay in the office? Rocky immediately stepped closer to her. Daniel answered before Samuel could. He stays with me. Mia nodded. Keep him off the tile if you can. He's compensating badly now that we've stressed the joint. The clinical instruction came automatically, and somehow that steadiness made the moment more unsettling. Even with federal badges waiting outside, Mia was still thinking about the dog first. Daniel respected that. It also frightened him. People who thought clearly under pressure usually had learned to do so the hard way. They moved into the hallway together. Riverstone had not stopped functioning, but the clinic's rhythm had changed. Staff members pretended to work while watching from the edges of rooms. Owen Miller stood near radiology with a stack of folders in his hands, his sandy hair sticking up as if he had run his fingers through it repeatedly. Emily hurried back to the front desk, but kept glancing behind her. In the reception area stood 3 people who did not belong in a veterinary clinic, yet somehow seemed to take command of it by standing still. The woman in front was in her early 40s, tall and narrow-shouldered, with dark skin, close-cropped black hair, and a long charcoal coat dusted with melting snow. Her face was composed in a way that suggested both intelligence and exhaustion. She had sharp cheekbones, steady brown eyes, and the kind of voice Daniel imagined could calm a witness or cut through a lie with equal ease. Beside her stood a broad man in his 50s with a shaved head, a graying beard trimmed close to his jaw, and hands large enough to make his notepad look small. His posture was protective but not aggressive. The third was younger, maybe 30, pale, lean, with reddish hair, a laptop bag slung over one shoulder, and the anxious focus of someone who trusted documents more than people. The woman stepped forward. Mia Carter? Mia stopped at the edge of the reception area. Yes. The woman opened a leather credential case. Special Agent Naomi Pierce, Federal Veterinary Contract Oversight Division. She indicated the men behind her. This is Investigator Malcolm Reed and Forensic Records Analyst Tyler Shaw. Malcolm Reed gave a small nod. He had the worn patience of a man who had interviewed too many grieving families and learned not to waste words. Tyler Shaw adjusted the strap of his bag and avoided looking at Rocky, which was probably wise. Naomi's gaze moved briefly to Daniel, then to Rocky, then back to Mia. We need to speak with you privately. Daniel stepped slightly closer. About Rocky? Naomi studied him. And you are? Daniel Hayes, Rocky's handler. Her expression shifted just enough to show recognition. Former Army Ranger Daniel Hayes? Daniel's eyes narrowed. Former. Naomi nodded. Then yes, Mr. Hayes. This may involve Rocky. But we came for Ms. Carter. The sentence rippled through the reception area. Emily lowered her eyes to the appointment schedule as if it contained answers. Samuel folded his arms. Mia remained still. Rocky, standing beside Daniel, gave a low rumble from deep in his chest. Not a threat yet. A warning that the emotional temperature in the room had changed. Mia turned slightly, not toward the agents, but toward Rocky. Easy, she said. The shepherd quieted immediately. Naomi noticed. So did Malcolm. So did Daniel. The quiet nurse had just calmed a retired military K-9 with one word in a room full of federal investigators. Naomi's gaze sharpened. May we use an office? Samuel stepped forward. Mine. His voice was polite but firm. This is still my hospital. Naomi inclined her head. Of course. As they moved back through the hallway, staff parted around them. Mia walked ahead without looking at anyone. Daniel followed with Rocky, despite Naomi's brief glance that suggested she had not invited him. Mia did not tell him to leave. That mattered. In Samuel's office, Rocky settled beside Daniel's chair with a slow, careful movement. The pain medication had not yet begun. The dog was still carrying himself through discipline alone. Naomi watched him lower himself, and something softened in her face. Not enough to interfere with her professionalism, but enough to prove she was not made of paperwork. He's the newest confirmed case, she said quietly. Mia looked at her. Confirmed. Naomi placed a sealed folder on Samuel's desk. We opened a preliminary inquiry 6 weeks ago after 2 retired working dogs from the same transition cycle required emergency orthopedic intervention. Both had clearances signed by Patriot Veterinary Assessment Services. Both clearances listed no significant orthopedic abnormalities. Their current scans tell a different story. Daniel's hand closed around Rocky's collar. How many dogs? Naomi did not answer him immediately. She looked at Mia. That's what we're trying to determine. Mia sat down slowly. She looked smaller for a moment, not weaker, only weighed down by a burden that had recognized her. Samuel closed the office door. Naomi remained standing. Malcolm Reed took a position near the wall, opening his notebook. Tyler Shaw removed his laptop and placed it on the corner of the desk, his fingers already moving. 3 years ago, Naomi said, you worked in the Military Working Dog Recovery and Transition Program at Fort Liberty, North Carolina. Daniel went still. Fort Liberty. The name answered one question and opened 10 more. Mia's eyes lowered. Yes. Naomi continued. You submitted a series of internal concern reports involving Patriot Veterinary Assessment Services, specifically around final medical clearances issued during a high-volume retirement cycle. Mia's face remained composed, but her fingers tightened once against her knee. I submitted 4 reports. Tyler looked up. We found 3. Mia looked at him then, and the air in the office changed again. There were 4. Tyler's expression flickered with professional interest. He was thin and nervous-looking, but when documents were involved, his uncertainty vanished. Do you still have copies? Naomi asked. Samuel's brows rose. Daniel looked at Mia sharply. Mia did not answer at once. Her gaze moved to Rocky. The dog watched her with those old, intelligent eyes, as if he knew that humans had finally reached the part of the story where hiding would hurt more than speaking. Yes, she said. I kept everything. Malcolm's pen stopped. Naomi drew a breath through her nose, slow and controlled. Where? Safe. Daniel gave a short laugh, without humor. That's not a place. Mia looked at him. It is if you know how to survive losing access to official channels. No one rushed to fill the silence after that. Daniel heard what she had not said. She had learned not to trust the system. Not theoretically, personally. Naomi pulled out the chair across from Mia and sat, softening the power dynamic by inches, but not abandoning it. Ms. Carter, we need those documents. Your reports may establish prior knowledge. If Patriot was warned about inaccurate clearances and continued issuing them, this becomes much larger than malpractice or negligence. Mia's lips pressed together. I know. Do you? Naomi asked, not unkindly. Because when you left Fort Liberty, the official record says you resigned voluntarily for personal reasons. Your supervisor's memo describes your concerns as unsupported by available evidence. Mia's eyes hardened for the first time. My supervisor's memo was written after he refused to review the evidence. Daniel leaned forward. Who was the supervisor? Mia looked away. Colonel Andrew Vale. Naomi's gaze shifted to Malcolm, who wrote the name down. Mia continued, and now her voice carried a quiet force that had not been there before. Vale said I was overreaching. He said I was emotionally attached to recovery cases and seeing patterns because I wanted to see them. He said contractors with federal approval did not need a nurse specialist second-guessing certified evaluations. Samuel's face darkened. He had seen that tone used against skilled women before. Calm dismissal dressed as procedure. Were you right? Daniel asked. Mia looked at Rocky. 3 dogs I flagged later developed major complications. One had spinal compression. One had an untreated hip injury. One had early neurological symptoms marked as resolved. And the 4th report? Naomi asked. Mia's expression closed slightly. That one disappeared. Tyler's fingers paused over the keyboard. Disappeared how? I submitted it through the same internal system. I received confirmation. 2 days later, the record no longer existed. When I asked, I was told there had been no 4th report. The room held that sentence like a match over dry grass. Naomi leaned back slowly. And you kept an external copy. Mia nodded once. Daniel stared at her, something like respect and frustration colliding in his eyes. Why didn't you go higher? Mia's face tightened, but she did not become defensive. I tried. The 2 words were plain. That made them worse. I requested review outside my chain. It stalled. I asked for case reevaluation. Denied. I asked for independent imaging comparison. Denied. After that, my schedule changed. Access changed. Colleagues stopped talking when I entered rooms. Cases I had followed for months were reassigned. She paused, and for the first time her voice thinned with memory. The dogs still needed care. I stayed as long as I could. Daniel's anger shifted direction. It had entered the room looking for someone to blame. Now it found a wider target. Then you left. Yes. And came here. Eventually. Samuel watched her with a sadness he did not try to hide. Mia, why didn't you tell me? She gave him a faint, tired smile. Would it have changed how many ear infections we treated? Emily would have laughed at that. Samuel did not. It might have changed how alone you were. That reached her. Daniel saw it. Her face did not break, but something behind it flinched. Naomi opened the sealed folder and removed 2 printed images, both radiographs. She placed them beside Rocky's file. These are from a retired detection dog in Virginia named Atlas, age 9. This one is from a patrol dog in Texas named Ranger, age 7. Both were cleared by Patriot. Both had chronic injuries that should have required intervention before retirement placement. Daniel looked down at Rocky, then at the images. 3 dogs now. Maybe more. The story was growing teeth. Rocky was no longer an isolated tragedy. He was a door. Mia stared at the images for a long time. Who signed their clearances? Naomi did not answer immediately. She did not need to. Mia already knew. Langford, Mia said. Tyler turned the laptop slightly. Victor Langford appears on both. Mia closed her eyes briefly. When she opened them, they were clear and cold. Then Rocky is not the first. Naomi's voice softened. No, but he may be the case that connects your original reports to the current investigation. Daniel felt the room tilt around that truth. Rocky, who had crossed deserts, found explosives, protected soldiers, and endured pain in silence, had now become evidence. Not just Daniel's dog, not just a patient. Evidence of a system that may have betrayed dozens like him. Mia stood abruptly. I need 10 minutes. Naomi's eyes narrowed. For what? To make a call. Daniel stood too. To who? Mia looked at him, then at Naomi. For the first time since the agents arrived, there was no deflection in her face. Only decision. To the person who has my backup drive. Samuel blinked. Malcolm's pen stopped again. Tyler actually looked impressed. Naomi rose slowly. Miss Carter, where is this drive? Mia looked through the office window toward the falling snow. Her voice was quiet, but every person in the room heard the steel inside it. Somewhere Colonel Vale, Victor Langford, and Patriot Veterinary Services couldn't reach it. Daniel looked at Rocky. Rocky looked at Mia. And in that moment, Daniel understood that the woman his dog had chosen had not been hiding because she was afraid of the truth. She had been hiding because she had protected it for 3 years, waiting for the day someone would finally be ready to listen. For several seconds after Mia mentioned the backup drive, nobody in Dr. Samuel Brooks's office moved. Outside, snow drifted steadily across the parking lot. Inside, every person in the room seemed to understand that they had just crossed an invisible line. This was no longer a question of whether Rocky had been failed. The question now was how many others had been failed alongside him. Daniel Hayes looked at Mia differently than he had that morning. When Rocky first chose her, Daniel had been curious. After the X-ray, he had been suspicious. Now he felt something else. Respect. Not because she had all the answers. Because she had been willing to pay a price for asking questions. Those were different things. And Daniel understood the difference better than most. Mia stepped into the hallway and pulled a phone from her pocket. Her hands appeared steady. They weren't. Not entirely. The number she dialed was one she had not called in almost 11 months. Each ring tightened something in her chest. By the 3rd ring, someone answered. Mia. The voice belonged to an older woman. Warm. Calm. Familiar. Mia closed her eyes briefly. Hello, Evelyn. The woman on the other end sighed softly. I wondered when I'd hear from you again. Evelyn Ross was 63 years old and lived outside Asheville, North Carolina. Tall and thin. With silver hair she wore braided down her back. Evelyn had spent nearly 3 decades working civilian rehabilitation programs for military working dogs. Most people saw a gentle grandmother. Those who knew her understood she possessed the stubborn courage of someone who had spent years fighting bureaucracies for injured animals that couldn't speak for themselves. 3 years earlier, when Mia realized her reports were disappearing, Evelyn had been the only person she trusted. The only one. Do you still have it? Mia asked quietly. A pause. Then, every page. Relief washed through Mia, so suddenly she nearly sat down. Good. Evelyn's tone changed immediately. What happened? Mia looked through the office window. Daniel stood beside Rocky. Naomi Pierce was reviewing documents. Tyler Shaw worked rapidly on his laptop. The investigation had already begun. We found another dog. Silence. Then, oh no. Rocky's clearance was signed by Langford. The silence became heavier. Because Evelyn knew exactly what that meant. How bad? Mia swallowed. A fracture over a year old. The older woman cursed softly. Mia almost smiled. Evelyn rarely cursed. When she did, people listened. I'll send everything, Evelyn said. Today. Thank you. Mia. The younger woman paused. What? You were right. The words hit harder than expected. For years she had told herself she didn't need validation, didn't need apologies, didn't need acknowledgement. Yet hearing those 3 words nearly broke something inside her. You were right. Not because she wanted victory, because she wished she had been wrong. She ended the call and returned to the office. Everyone looked up. She still has the files. Naomi immediately stood. How much? Mia thought. Hundreds of pages. Tyler actually smiled. For the first time all day, data excited him. People confused him. Documents made sense. Documents told stories. And stories could be proven. Can she transfer them electronically? Yes. Naomi nodded. Good. The federal agent looked relieved. Which worried Mia. Because people only felt relief when they desperately needed something. And federal investigators did not become desperate easily. Daniel noticed the expression too. How big is this? Naomi hesitated. That answer alone told him plenty. Agent Pierce. She looked at him. How big? The woman folded her arms. For several seconds, she considered the question. Then she answered honestly. We don't know yet. Daniel frowned. You opened a federal investigation without knowing? We opened a preliminary review. That's not an answer. No, Naomi agreed. It isn't. The office became quiet. Finally, she continued. We currently have 11 suspicious retirement evaluations. The room froze. 11. Daniel looked down at Rocky. 11 dogs. 11 families. 11 stories. And those were only the ones investigators knew about. What happened to them? Naomi's expression darkened. Several required surgery. Daniel felt his stomach tighten. And the others? The agent looked away briefly. That frightened him more than any answer. 3 died. Nobody spoke. Even Tyler stopped typing. 3. The number seemed impossibly small and impossibly large at the same time. 3 dogs. 3 lives. 3 partners. Gone. Daniel slowly sat down. Rocky immediately rested his head against his leg. The simple gesture nearly destroyed him. Because Rocky could have been one of them. If the injury had progressed differently. If the timing had changed. If Mia hadn't noticed. The thought made him physically ill. Across the room, Samuel Brooks removed his glasses. The old veterinarian looked exhausted. Cause of death. Naomi answered quietly. Officially, Samuel nodded. Age-related complications. Nobody missed the bitterness in her voice. Unofficially, the agent looked directly at Mia. Pain. The word landed like a stone. Mia closed her eyes briefly. She had seen it before. Dogs that endured too much for too long. Dogs whose loyalty became a weapon used against them. Because they never complained. Never stopped working. Never stopped trying. Even when they should have. Especially when they should have. The room remained silent. Then Tyler cleared his throat. Everyone looked toward him. The young analyst seemed uncomfortable being the center of attention. He preferred computers. Computers were easier. But something on his screen had his attention. Agent Pierce. What is it? Tyler turned the laptop. I found something. Naomi moved closer. So did Mia. A database appeared on the screen. Rows of names. Dates. Evaluations. Signatures. Tyler pointed. Look at this. Mia leaned forward. Her pulse accelerated. Because she immediately saw the pattern. Victor Langford. Again. And again. And again. The same signature. The same approval language. The same wording. Dozens of times. Too many times. Daniel couldn't understand all the details. But he understood repetition. And this was repetition. What am I looking at? Tyler swallowed. A retirement cluster. Samuel frowned. Eh what? The analyst adjusted his glasses. Multiple military working dogs evaluated within the same time period. His finger moved down the screen. Same contractor. Another line. Same evaluator. Another. Same conclusions. Daniel felt dread growing. How many? Tyler hesitated. Then answered. 63. The office fell silent. Nobody moved. Nobody spoke. 63. The number seemed absurd. Impossible. Terrifying. Naomi stared at the screen. You sure? Tyler nodded. Very. The agent rubbed her forehead because she knew what 63 meant. Not 63 confirmed victims. Worse, 63 possible victims. 63 families. 63 dogs. 63 chances for something to have gone terribly wrong. Daniel looked toward Rocky. The shepherd remained calm, unaware, trusting. The sight somehow made everything worse. Mia felt old anger stirring. Not the hot, explosive anger of youth. Something colder, more dangerous. The anger of someone who had watched preventable suffering and been told to stop asking questions. 3 years. 3 years she had tried to leave this behind. 3 years pretending she was simply a veterinary nurse in Montana. 3 years trying to convince herself the system would eventually correct itself. Now 63 names sat on a laptop screen, and 3 dogs were already dead. The past wasn't buried. It had been growing. Naomi finally looked up. When can we get the files from Evelyn? Tonight. The agent nodded. Good. Then she looked at Mia. Really looked at her. Not as a witness. Not as a source. As something else. Someone who might become essential. You understand these records better than anyone we have. Mia immediately shook her head. No. Yes. The response came instantly. Confidently. And from Naomi Pierce, confidence meant something. You identified the issue before anyone else. Mia laughed softly. Without humor. No one listened. The words escaped before she could stop them. The room became quiet again. Because everyone understood exactly what she meant. Years ago she had spoken. Years ago she had warned people. Years ago she had tried. And nobody listened. Until Rocky. Until now. Daniel looked at her. For the first time, he truly understood why his dog trusted her. Rocky wasn't choosing a stranger. Not really. The shepherd had spent years working beside people whose job was protecting others. He understood character, loyalty, integrity. Those qualities had guided him his entire life. And somehow he had recognized them in Mia immediately. Long before Daniel had. The realization settled heavily in his chest. Outside, snow continued falling. Inside, the investigation continued growing. Tyler kept searching databases. Malcolm Reed reviewed timelines. Samuel organized medical records. Naomi coordinated calls. The office slowly transformed into a command center. And at the center of it all sat Rocky. The injured military dog who should have retired healthy. The dog whose X-ray had reopened a forgotten investigation. The dog who had walked into Riverstone Veterinary Medical Center and changed everything. Several hours later, as darkness settled outside, Tyler suddenly looked up again. His face had gone pale. Not nervous pale. Alarmed pale. Agent Pierce. Everyone stopped. What now? Tyler stared at the screen. His voice sounded different. Tighter. I found another name. Naomi stepped closer. What name? The analyst swallowed. Then turned the laptop toward the room. Mia saw it first, and instantly felt the blood drain from her face. Because she knew exactly who it was. Not Victor Langford. Someone worse. Someone she had hoped never to encounter again. The name stared back from the screen. Connected to retirement approvals. Connected to missing reviews. Connected to internal complaints. Connected to everything. Colonel Andrew Vale. And for the first time in 3 years, Mia realized the corruption might have reached far higher than she had ever imagined. By nightfall, Riverstone Veterinary Medical Center no longer felt like a veterinary hospital. The building still smelled faintly of antiseptic, wet dog fur, coffee, and the lavender candle Emily Foster kept hidden behind the reception desk, even though Dr. Brooks had told her twice that open flames and medical oxygen were a terrible friendship waiting to happen. But beneath those familiar smells, something sharper had entered the air. Purpose. Fear. The kind of tension that settled over a place when ordinary people realized they had become witnesses to something much larger than themselves. Snow pressed against the windows and soft white curtains, making the outside world look peaceful, almost holy. While inside the clinic, names of retired military dogs filled Tyler Shaw's laptop screen like a roll call of forgotten soldiers. Rocky rested on a thick orthopedic mat beside Daniel Hayes's chair, his black and gray body finally still under the first wave of pain medication Dr. Samuel Brooks had given him. The old shepherd's ears twitched now and then, tracking voices even in rest. He looked calmer than he had all day, but to Mia Carter, that calm carried its own heartbreak. Pain relief had not made him weak. It had revealed how hard he had been fighting. Special Agent Naomi Pierce stood at the end of Samuel's office with her phone pressed to one ear and a legal pad in her other hand. Her charcoal coat had been folded over the back of a chair, leaving her in a dark sweater and tailored pants. But without the coat, she somehow looked even more formidable. Naomi was not a woman who wasted movement. Every step, every pause, every glance had purpose. People like her did not need to raise their voices. They simply made the room understand that time mattered. Investigator Malcolm Reed sat near the wall with his notebook open across one knee. His broad shoulders filled the chair, and under the clinic's fluorescent light, the gray in his beard looked almost silver. Malcolm had the tired eyes of a man who had interviewed too many victims and learned that grief often spoke in fragments. He said little, but when he wrote something down, everyone near him felt it had become important. Tyler Shaw sat at Samuel's desk, red hair untidy, sleeves pushed up, fingers moving across the keyboard as if the computer were the only language he fully trusted. He had 3 databases open, 2 federal access portals, and 1 spreadsheet he had built in less than 15 minutes. Owen Miller would have called it wizardry if Owen had not been hiding in radiology pretending to reorganize lead aprons. Mia stood behind Tyler, arms crossed tightly, reading the screen faster than he expected. Each row showed a dog's name, service category, retirement date, medical clearance, evaluator, placement status, and current outcome if known. At first there had been 11 suspicious cases, then 24, then 37. By the time Evelyn Ross's backup files arrived through an encrypted transfer, Tyler had cross-referenced the records with archive transition logs and found a cluster of 63 dogs processed through Patriot Veterinary Assessment Services during the same 18-month window. Mia had stared at the number so long Daniel thought she might stop breathing. 63 was not a mistake. It was not a bad day. It was not one careless evaluator missing one injury. 63 meant a system, a machine. And somewhere inside that machine, someone had decided that the suffering of loyal animals was cheaper than telling the truth. Daniel sat with one hand resting on Rocky's shoulder. He had not moved far from the dog since the X-ray. The medication had made Rocky drowsy, but whenever Daniel's hand shifted away, the shepherd opened one eye, as if checking whether the world remained where he had left it. Daniel was 41, but in that office he looked older, the scar along his jaw standing out pale against his skin. He had survived firefights, explosions, long deployments, and the slow loneliness of coming home with memories that did not know how to behave in civilian rooms. But this was different. This was not an enemy he could identify on a map. This was paperwork, signatures, contracts, clean words printed over dirty decisions. "How many are still alive?" he asked. His voice was low. Naomi ended her call and turned toward Tyler. Tyler swallowed. "Based on the records we have right now, 51 are confirmed living. 9 are deceased. 3 are currently unknown pending placement verification." 9, Daniel repeated. The word had no place to go. It just stayed there. Mia closed her eyes for half a second. In her mind, each number became a body. A shepherd with bad hips. A Malinois with spinal compression. A Labrador detection dog who stopped climbing porch steps. A handler told it was age. A family told it was natural decline. A dog trying to be brave because bravery was all he had ever been taught. Samuel Brooks, who had been quiet for several minutes, finally spoke. "How many of those living dogs have updated medical evaluations?" Tyler clicked another tab. 12. Of those, 8 show major conditions that contradict their original clearances. Samuel's expression hardened in a way Mia had rarely seen. He was normally a gentle man, the kind who apologized before giving a vaccination, but anger had found him now, righteous and old as thunder. And the others? No recent scans on file. Samuel looked at Naomi. "Then you don't have 51 living dogs. You have 51 emergencies waiting to be examined." Naomi nodded once. "We're initiating outreach in stages. Placement families, handlers, secondary service programs, regional veterinary centers." Stages. Daniel's tone sharpened. Rocky opened both eyes. Mia put a hand down near the dog's muzzle without thinking, and Rocky settled again. Naomi looked at Daniel calmly. "If we call 63 households tonight without verified support options, we create panic without care. We need local clinics ready, orthopedic referrals lined up, evidence preservation instructions, and emergency pain protocols." Daniel wanted to argue. His face said so, but the soldier in him understood logistics. The man who loved Rocky hated logistics in that moment, hated anything that did not move fast enough to outrun suffering. Naomi saw the conflict and softened her voice. Mr. Hayes, I know what you want. I want it too. But if we move badly, records disappear, contractors lawyer up, families get incomplete information, and dogs lose access to care while everyone fights over jurisdiction. Daniel looked down at Rocky. His hand tightened in the fur. Then move well, he said. But move fast. The first family Naomi reached directly was in Wyoming. She put the call on speaker only after receiving permission from a woman named Sarah Whitcomb, a school librarian from Casper. Sarah was 46, with a soft voice, asthma that made her breath catch between longer sentences, and a retired detection dog named Moose sleeping beside her fireplace. Moose was a 10-year-old chocolate Labrador, barrel-chested, gray around the eyes, and known in Sarah's neighborhood for stealing garden gloves and then looking deeply wounded when asked to return them. Sarah had adopted him 18 months earlier after being told he was healthy, only slowing from age. As Naomi explained that Moose needed a new orthopedic evaluation, Sarah grew quiet. I knew something was wrong, she said at last. He cries when he stands, but only if he thinks I can't hear. Mia turned away from the phone. Daniel shut his eyes. Sarah continued, her voice trembling now. The paperwork said he was fine. I thought maybe I was being dramatic. Naomi spoke gently, promising a regional clinic would contact her by morning. When the call ended, no one said anything for a while. Then Tyler marked Moose's row in yellow. Urgent review. The color looked too small for what it meant. More files opened. More names surfaced. Atlas in Virginia. Ranger in Texas. Moose in Wyoming. Daisy, a Belgian Malinois placed with a retired deputy in Idaho. Euthanized after sudden mobility collapse. King, a black German Shepherd in Ohio. Deceased after months of neurological decline. Bella, a sandy-colored Labrador in Arizona, surrendered to a rescue when her placement family could not afford surgery they had never been warned might be necessary. Each story arrived through a line of data, and each line became heavier than the last. Mia felt herself slipping backward into old rooms at Fort Liberty, into the smell of disinfectant and wet concrete, into the recovery kennels where dogs slept after surgeries and handlers sat outside because they refused to leave. She remembered writing her first report against Patriot Veterinary Services. She had been 29 then, still hopeful enough to believe evidence was a lantern powerful people were obligated to follow. She remembered Colonel Andrew Vail reading her summary with a polite, empty expression. Vail had been in his early 50s then, tall, clean-shaven, and handsome in the carved way of men who knew how authority looked in photographs. His hair had been iron gray, his uniform immaculate, his smile measured. He treated subordinates with a calm that seemed respectful until one realized it was actually distance. He never shouted. He did not need to. Vail's cruelty had always been administrative. Reassignments, delays, missing access, quiet recommendations that a person might be more comfortable elsewhere. Mia had told herself she left because she was tired, because her work had become impossible, because one person could not carry a wall that everyone else kept rebuilding. But now, standing in Samuel's office as the names of injured dogs multiplied, she felt the old shame return. She had left. The dogs had stayed in the system. Rocky had stayed in the system. Mia. Daniel's voice pulled her back. She looked up and realized everyone was watching her. Naomi's expression was careful. You okay? Mia almost laughed at the question, not because it was funny, but because no honest answer would fit inside the room. Instead, she nodded. What did you find? Tyler looked uneasy. Langford's office line is disconnected. Naomi's gaze sharpened. Since when? Hard to tell. The public number routes to voicemail. His professional registry lists a Billings address, but the business site went offline 2 hours ago. Malcolm Reed looked up from his notebook. 2 hours ago? Tyler nodded. Roughly. Naomi's jaw tightened. She turned away and made another call. This one was short. Her voice changed while she spoke, losing every trace of gentleness. Confirm physical location. Now. And send 2 units, not 1. Daniel stood. What's happening? Naomi ended the call. We attempted contact with Dr. Victor Langford. His office is closed, phone's inactive, website disabled. We're checking his last known address. He knows, Mia said. Her voice was so quiet that it made everyone listen harder. Naomi turned. You don't know that. Mia looked at her. Yes, I do. Daniel believed her immediately. He did not know why, except that Mia had spent all day being right about things she did not want to be right about. An hour crawled by. The clinic had officially closed to regular clients, but no one went home. Emily made coffee that tasted like punishment and distributed it with the solemn pride of someone contributing to history through caffeine. Owen emerged from radiology long enough to ask whether anyone needed scanned copies of anything, then retreated when Rocky looked at him. Samuel arranged for Rocky to spend the night in the large recovery suite, refusing Daniel's offer to take him home. No stairs tonight, Samuel said firmly. No truck jump. No heroic nonsense. Daniel looked offended. I don't do heroic nonsense. Mia, Samuel, Emily, and even Naomi looked at him. Daniel sighed. Fine. Minimal heroic nonsense. It was the first moment all day that almost felt human. At 9:42 p.m., Naomi's phone rang. Her face changed as she listened. Malcolm stood before she finished the call. Tyler stopped typing. Daniel felt Rocky stir beside him. Naomi lowered the phone slowly. Langford is gone. Mia's stomach dropped, though she had expected it. Gone how? Naomi looked at her. His Billings office was cleared out. Hard drives removed. File cabinets empty. Staff says he left early this afternoon after receiving a call. His home is empty. Vehicle missing. Daniel's voice turned cold. He ran. Malcolm Reed closed his notebook with one heavy hand. Looks that way. Tyler refreshed a screen. His banking activity shows a charge at a gas station outside Livingston 3 hours ago. Naomi turned sharply. Direction? Eastbound. Billings said east. So did highways, motels, state lines, and 1,000 places a man with money and warning could disappear. Mia stared at the retirement cluster on the screen. Victor Langford had signed those clearances. Victor had watched complaints vanish. Victor had known, or should have known, what those x-rays would show. And now Victor was running. Then the front desk phone rang. Everyone froze. The sound was absurdly normal, bright, and electronic in the darkened clinic. Emily stood behind the reception counter, eyes wide. Naomi lifted one hand, signaling everyone still. The phone rang again. Mia felt something cold move through her. Not fear exactly. Recognition. Some predators ran. Some called first. Emily reached for the receiver, but Naomi shook her head. Mia stepped forward before anyone could stop her. Daniel moved with her. Rocky struggled up onto his front legs, but Daniel gently held him down. Stay, buddy. Mia looked at Naomi. Naomi's eyes narrowed. Do not answer unless you're ready to keep him talking. Mia held her gaze. I know. The phone rang a third time. Mia picked it up. Riverstone Veterinary Medical Center. This is Mia. For a heartbeat, there was only static. Then a man's voice entered the line, smooth, controlled, and familiar enough to bring 3 years of buried anger back into her bones. Mia Carter, Victor Langford said softly. I was wondering how long it would take before you became a problem again. Mia did not move. Across the room, Naomi was already reaching for Tyler's laptop. Daniel's face went hard as stone. Rocky gave a low, wounded growl from the office doorway. Mia kept her voice calm, almost gentle. Hello, Victor. The moment Victor Langford's voice came through the phone, every sound inside Riverstone Veterinary Medical Center seemed to disappear. The hum of fluorescent lights, the tapping of Tyler Shaw's keyboard, the distant rumble of the heating system fighting against the Montana winter. All of it faded. Mia Carter stood behind the reception desk with the receiver pressed against her ear, and for the first time in 3 years, she heard the voice of the man whose name had haunted dozens of reports, missing files, and unanswered questions. Hello, Victor. Her voice remained calm. That surprised even her. Across the room, Naomi Pierce was already moving. The federal agent pointed toward Tyler. The young analyst immediately connected monitoring software to the clinic's phone system. Malcolm Reed stepped into the hallway, quietly calling additional personnel. Nobody interrupted Mia. Nobody spoke. Every second mattered. Victor laughed softly. The sound made Mia's skin crawl. Not because it was loud, because it wasn't. The man had always spoken like someone who believed he was the smartest person in the room, even when he wasn't. Especially when he wasn't. You sound different, Victor said. Mia looked through the office doorway toward Rocky. The shepherd was watching her. Watching everything. I've had 3 years to practice. Victor chuckled. Still dramatic. Mia didn't respond. Silence was often more useful than argument. And she knew exactly what Naomi wanted. Time. Every second Victor remained on the line increased the chances of finding him. Why are you calling? Mia asked. Another laugh. You know why? No. Yes, you do. The old arrogance remained intact. Victor always preferred conversations where everyone already knew the answer. That way he never had to explain himself. Unfortunately for him, Mia had learned how to handle people like Victor years ago. Then explain it. A pause. Brief. Unexpected. Victor wasn't accustomed to being challenged. You're making a mistake. There it is. What? The reason you called. Victor became quiet. Across the room, Tyler raised one finger. 1 minute. They needed longer. Much longer. Mia kept her expression neutral. What mistake am I making? The same one you made at Fort Liberty. Daniel felt his jaw tighten. The mention of Fort Liberty instantly transformed the conversation from personal to historical. Victor continued. You never understood how things worked. No. Mia's voice remained steady. I understood perfectly. Victor sighed. The sound carried genuine frustration. You always thought paperwork was reality. Mia almost smiled. The irony was unbelievable. The man who signed false reports was lecturing her about reality. You signed Rocky's clearance. Silence. A long silence. Tyler's fingers moved faster. 30 seconds later, he pointed toward the screen. Location data was beginning to populate. Not enough. Not yet. Victor finally answered. That's why you're upset. Mia felt anger stir. Cold anger. The dangerous kind. Rocky had a fractured hip. Did he? The casual response shocked everyone listening. Even Naomi. Mia tightened her grip on the receiver. More than a year old. Victor remained silent. Not defensive. Not surprised. Silent. The silence itself became an answer. Daniel stood from his chair. Rocky immediately rose with him despite the pain. The former ranger looked ready to grab the phone himself. Naomi stepped between him and Mia. Not aggressively. Practically. They needed Victor talking. Not hanging up. Mia understood. Daniel did too. Eventually, Victor spoke again. You always cared too much. The statement transported Mia backward in time. Fort Liberty. 3 years earlier. A conference room. A stack of reports. Victor sitting across the table. Saying nearly the same thing. You care too much. Back then she had mistaken it for criticism. Now she understood. It had been a confession. People like Victor viewed compassion as weakness because they lacked it themselves. You mean I cared about the dogs? Another pause. You cared about being right. No. Mia's response came instantly. I cared about what happened to them. Victor laughed again. This time the sound held bitterness. You still don't understand. Tyler raised 2 fingers. 2 minutes. Good. But not enough. Naomi needed more. Mia needed more. Everyone needed more. Help me understand. Victor hesitated. For the first time. The hesitation interested Mia. Because it suggested something unexpected. Emotion. Not guilt. Something else. Fear. Do you know what happens when retirement evaluations get delayed? Mia remained silent. Victor continued. Funding gets delayed. His voice grew sharper. Transfers get delayed. Another pause. Programs get delayed. The justification sounded pathetic. Even to him. Mia could hear it. So could everyone else. Animals were suffering. Victor laughed bitterly. Animals always suffer. Daniel nearly exploded. Only Rocky pressing against his leg kept him still. The shepherd sensed the tension, sensed the anger, and remained close. Grounding him. Steadying him. Victor continued talking. Talking was good. Talking kept him connected. Talking made mistakes possible. You think I created the system? No. Mia glanced toward Tyler. The analyst was staring intensely at his monitor. Data continued arriving. Signal strength increasing. Almost there. But you participated. Victor became quiet. The silence lasted almost 10 seconds. Long enough for Naomi to realize something important. Victor hadn't called simply to threaten Mia. He had called because he was scared. People who feel powerful disappear. People who call former whistleblowers after midnight are often afraid. The realization changed everything. Mia noticed it too. So she pushed. Why are you really calling? Victor didn't answer immediately. Because he knew she was right. The original reason no longer mattered. Something else did. Finally he spoke. How much do they know? There it was. The real question. Not anger. Not intimidation. Information. He wanted information. Which meant he lacked it. Which meant he was running blind. Mia carefully hid her reaction. They know enough. How much? Enough. Victor cursed. The first genuine emotion he'd shown all night. Across the room, Tyler suddenly looked up. His eyes widened. Then he turned the monitor toward Naomi. The federal agent's expression hardened instantly. They had it. Or something close. Billings. Western Edge. Near Interstate 90. Not exact, but narrowing. Fast. Naomi quietly texted coordinates. Malcolm stepped into the hallway. More calls. More movement. The machine was activating. Victor had no idea. Mia continued talking. How many dogs? The question surprised him. What? How many did you sign off on? Silence. Then, I don't know. A lie. Everyone knew it. Including Victor. Try. Another pause. Longer this time. Tyler pointed again. More precise. A cluster of towers. A location radius shrinking rapidly. Mia almost felt sorry for Victor. Almost. You really think this is about me? Victor asked. The statement caught her attention. Because it sounded defensive. Not arrogant. Defensive. What do you mean? Victor laughed without humor. You're still chasing the wrong person. The room froze. Naomi looked up. Daniel looked up. Even Tyler stopped typing. Mia felt her pulse accelerate. Not because she believed him. Because she knew enough about investigations to recognize an important statement. The guilty rarely shared blame voluntarily. Unless they feared someone higher. Who? Victor immediately regretted speaking. The silence confirmed it. Who, Victor? Nothing. Then, you don't know what you're involved in. The line carried genuine fear now. Not performance. Real fear. The kind that comes when people realize consequences are approaching. Mia pressed harder. Tell me. No. Why? Because some people don't disappear from jobs. His voice dropped. They disappear permanently. The room became cold. Daniel felt it. Naomi felt it. Everyone did. Because suddenly this wasn't about false paperwork. Not entirely. Something larger lurked beneath it. Something Victor feared. Tyler suddenly stood. The analyst never stood. Not during work. Not during investigations. Never. Yet now he was standing. We got him. Nobody reacted. Not outwardly. Victor continued speaking. Unaware. Tyler pointed to the screen. A blinking marker appeared. Roadside motel. Outside Billings. Near Interstate 90. Exact match. Naomi immediately moved toward the hallway. Malcolm followed. Phones appeared. Instructions flew. Federal agents mobilized. The trap had closed. Mia kept Victor talking. Just in case. You're afraid. The accusation hit harder than expected. Victor laughed. But it sounded hollow. Smart girl. You are. Another pause. Then the truth. Small. Simple. Real. Maybe. The admission surprised everyone. Including him. Mia closed her eyes briefly. Because she suddenly understood something. Victor wasn't the mastermind. He was part of it. Responsible. Guilty. Dangerous. But afraid. And afraid people often reveal more than they intend. Turn yourself in. Victor laughed. Genuinely this time. No. Why not? You think they'll protect me? The statement landed heavily. Mia's pulse quickened. Because once again, Victor sounded less like a villain and more like a terrified witness. Whatever stood above him still remained hidden. But that mystery belonged to another day. Tonight belonged to Rocky. To the investigation. To the truth. Several minutes later, Naomi re-entered the room. She looked directly at Mia, then gave a single nod. They had him. Mia understood immediately. Victor did not. Still talking. Still running. Still unaware that federal vehicles were already moving toward his location. Victor. What? Mia looked through the office doorway. Rocky was watching her. Watching everything. The dog who started all of this. The dog who endured pain in silence. The dog who refused to stop fighting. Goodbye. The line went silent. Then disconnected. For hours later, shortly after 2 in the morning, Naomi's phone rang. Everyone still awake looked up. The federal agent listened. Nodded once. Then ended the call. For a moment she said nothing. Then she looked at Mia. Looked at Daniel. Looked at Rocky. They got him. Nobody spoke. Not immediately. Because the moment felt bigger than words. Victor Langford had been arrested at a roadside motel outside Billings, Montana. Alone. Exhausted. Attempting to arrange transportation farther east. The escape was over. But the story wasn't. Because during the arrest, agents recovered multiple storage devices, financial records, and communication logs. And for the first time since Rocky walked through the doors of Riverstone Veterinary Medical Center, investigators finally had a path toward the truth. The system had started to crack, and what lay beneath it was about to change everything. 3 months after Victor Langford's arrest, winter still held Montana in its white fist, but the truth had begun moving faster than snow could bury it. The story did not explode all at once. It spread in fragments, like cracks across frozen glass. First came the emergency medical reviews, then the federal subpoenas, then the quiet phone calls to retired handlers, foster families, adoption programs, and regional veterinary hospitals across the country. By the end of the first month, Special Agent Naomi Pierce's preliminary inquiry had become a national investigation, and the name Patriot Veterinary Assessment Services no longer sounded like a contractor. It sounded like a wound. The documents Mia Carter had protected for 3 years became the spine of the case. Her original reports from Fort Liberty, the missing fourth complaint, the imaging notes, the internal confirmations, the emails that showed her concerns had been received, redirected, minimized, and then buried beneath language so clean it felt almost holy in its dishonesty. Terms like insufficient support, terms like contractor confidence, terms like no further action required. Daniel Hayes came to hate those phrases. They looked harmless on paper, but behind them were dogs like Rocky, Atlas, Moose, Ranger, Bella, and dozens more whose pain had been made invisible by ink. Riverstone Veterinary Medical Center returned to its normal schedule, at least from the outside. Dogs still came in with ear infections. Cats still arrived furious in carriers, hissing as if the entire medical profession had been invented to insult them personally. Ranchers still brought in working dogs with torn paws, porcupine quills, and the stubborn belief that every bill should be cheaper if paid in cash. Emily Foster still smiled at every animal as if greeting royalty, though she had developed a new habit of glancing at every large shepherd with a tenderness that made her eyes shine. Owen Miller still worked radiology with nervous precision, but after Rocky's case, he triple-checked every orthopedic image before sending it forward. Dr. Samuel Brooks still walked the halls with his tablet, silver hair neat, voice calm, hands gentle, but the old veterinarian had changed too. He no longer accepted transferred medical summaries without asking for the full file. He had always been careful. Now he was relentless. Mia changed least of all on the outside, which meant she changed most deeply where no one could easily see it. She still arrived early, still wore navy scrubs, still tied her chestnut hair back in the same practical ponytail, still took her coffee black and forgot to drink half of it. But the quiet around her felt different. Before, people had mistaken her silence for distance. Now they understood it had been shelter. A person did not keep evidence for 3 years because she wanted attention. She kept it because some part of her still believed the dead deserved witnesses, the living deserved rescue, and the truth deserved a chance even when the world was not ready for it. Naomi Pierce called her twice a week at first, then almost every day as the case expanded. The calls were never casual. Naomi was not a casual woman. She spoke in crisp updates, asked precise questions, and listened when Mia explained how transition evaluations could be manipulated without appearing fraudulent to people outside the system. Which imaging views mattered, which pain responses working dogs might hide, which language in clearance reports suggested copy-paste medicine rather than actual examination. Mia answered because the dogs needed her to answer. But after every call, she often sat alone in the supply corridor for a minute, staring at shelves of gauze and saline, reminding herself to breathe. Rocky's surgery happened in January at a specialist hospital in Colorado. The facility was called Front Range Veterinary Orthopedic Center, a glass-and-stone building outside Fort Collins where snow gathered along the parking lot curbs, and the lobby smelled faintly of polished floors and anxious owners. The surgeon was Dr. Helena Price, a 52-year-old orthopedic specialist with copper-red hair cut bluntly at her jaw, pale skin freckled across the nose, and hands so steady they seemed separate from the rest of the uncertain world. Helena was not warm in the ordinary sense. She did not fill silences with comfort. She did not promise miracles. But when she examined Rocky, her sharp green eyes softened with professional sorrow, and that was enough for Daniel to trust her. "He has been compensating for a long time," she said after reviewing the scans. Long enough that his muscles learned a lie and began calling it normal. Daniel stood beside Rocky, one hand on the dog's head. "Can you fix it?" Helena looked at him honestly. "We can reduce his pain. We can restore function. We can give him a better life than the one he's been forced to accept. But this is not a reset button, Mr. Hayes. Chronic pain leaves footprints. Daniel nodded. He appreciated the truth, even when it hurt. Especially when it hurt. Mia traveled to Colorado for the surgery, though she told everyone she was only there because Naomi needed a medical consultant nearby for chain of evidence documentation. Daniel did not argue with the excuse. He simply watched her kneel beside Rocky before the procedure. The shepherd, shaved along one hip and fitted with an IV catheter, looked smaller in the pre-op room than he ever had in the field. Still noble, still watchful, but vulnerable in a way that made Daniel's throat close. Rocky's silver muzzle rested briefly against Mia's wrist. She lowered her forehead until it almost touched his, not quite, just close enough for him to feel her breath. "You don't have to be brave the whole time," she whispered. Daniel heard it. He pretended he did not. Rocky blinked slowly, as if considering the idea. For a dog trained to work through fear, pain, and confusion, permission to stop being brave was perhaps the strangest command of all. The surgery lasted 4 hours and 26 minutes. Daniel counted every minute. Mia sat beside him in the waiting area beneath a television showing a cooking program neither of them watched. A woman across the room cried softly over a poodle named Winston, and an elderly man in a cowboy hat fell asleep, holding a cat carrier on his lap. Daniel's leg bounced until Mia placed one hand lightly on his knee, not affectionate, not intimate, simply grounding. He stopped. For a long time, neither spoke. Then Daniel said, "I keep thinking about the others." Mia looked at him. "So do I. How many now?" She knew what he meant. The number changed almost daily. 54 have been located and scheduled for new evaluations. 31 have already been examined. 17 have confirmed untreated orthopedic or neurological issues. Daniel absorbed that. His face hardened, then softened. And the dead? Mia looked toward the window, where snow tapped lightly against the glass. 12 confirmed. He closed his eyes. God. The word left him like a prayer and a curse at once. Mia did not offer comfort. She had learned that some numbers deserved silence. While Rocky slept after surgery, the investigation widened. Victor Langford's seized storage devices revealed payment trails, altered templates, deleted correspondence, and communication logs linking Patriot's evaluation reports to administrators who had pressured contractors to move retirement cases faster. Victor, it turned out, had not acted alone. He had been useful because he was willing. He had been protected because he was convenient. Colonel Andrew Vale's name appeared in scheduling directives, complaint routing memos, and one particularly damning message advising that Mia Carter's reports should be contained before creating unnecessary contract exposure. Naomi called Mia the morning that message was confirmed. Mia was standing outside Rocky's recovery room with a paper cup of terrible hospital coffee in her hand. She listened without moving. Daniel watched her face and saw no victory there. Only grief sharpened into confirmation. "Contained," she repeated after Naomi finished. "That was the word?" Naomi's voice crackled through the speaker. "Yes." Mia looked through the glass at Rocky sleeping under a blue blanket. "I was not the thing that needed containing." Naomi was quiet for a moment. "No," she said. "You weren't." Rocky's recovery was not cinematic. It was not a montage of triumphant music and sudden healing. It was slow, stubborn, messy work. It was Daniel sleeping on a pull-out chair because he refused to leave the post-op ward until Helena Price threatened to list him as a patient. It was Mia teaching him how to support Rocky's hindquarters with a sling during the first assisted steps. It was Rocky growling softly at a therapy ball as if the bright blue object had personally betrayed the United States military. It was Daniel laughing for the first time in days when Rocky refused hydrotherapy by placing one paw in the water, then looking at everyone with moral disappointment. It was pain medication schedules, incision checks, controlled movement, and the strange humility of learning how to help a warrior become a patient. Rocky did not like dependence. He tolerated it for Daniel. He accepted it from Mia. From anyone else, he negotiated with his teeth and facial expression alone, which was usually enough. One afternoon, a rehabilitation therapist named Jonah Keene joined Rocky's case. Jonah was 35, tall and lanky, with warm brown skin, close-cropped curls, and a neatly trimmed beard that made him look more serious than he actually was. He had a gentle sense of humor and a limp from a motorcycle accident in his 20s, an injury that had ended his dream of becoming a professional runner and redirected him into animal rehabilitation. I like patients who resent me, Jonah said cheerfully during Rocky's first session. It means they have goals. Rocky stared at him. Daniel said, he may be planning your funeral. Jonah nodded. Excellent motivation. Even Mia smiled at that. Jonah understood pride in injured bodies. He never rushed Rocky, never pitted him, and never acted as if recovery meant returning to what had been. We're not rebuilding the old dog, Jonah told Daniel. We're helping him become comfortable in the body he has now. That sentence stayed with Daniel longer than he expected, perhaps because it applied to more than Rocky. By February, the investigation had reached congressional staff, military oversight offices, and private veterinary boards in 6 states. Patriot Veterinary Assessment Services suspended operations pending review. 2 administrators resigned. 3 contractors lost certification. Colonel Andrew Vail was placed under formal investigation, though Naomi warned Mia that high-ranking men rarely fell quickly, even when gravity had been waiting for years. Mia understood. Systems protected their own until protection became more expensive than sacrifice. Still, the movement had begun. Families were receiving calls. Dogs were being rechecked. Treatment funds were being released under emergency provisions. Sarah Whitcomb's Labrador, Moose, was diagnosed with severe hip degeneration and scheduled for surgery support. Bella, the Labrador in Arizona, was placed with a rescue that specialized in medical rehabilitation. Atlas in Virginia began spinal treatment. Ranger in Texas received pain management for an injury his family had been told was normal aging. Each update reached Mia like a small flame in a dark field. Not enough to erase what had happened. Enough to show that the darkness had edges. Daniel began keeping a notebook. It surprised him. He had never been a journal person. Words on paper felt too vulnerable, too permanent. But Rocky's medications, therapy sessions, appetite changes, mood shifts, and walking progress needed tracking, and soon the notebook became something else. On one page, Daniel wrote the names of every dog Naomi confirmed as receiving new care. Moose, Atlas, Ranger, Bella, Daisy, though Daisy was gone, because Daniel decided the dead deserved to be counted too. King, Scout, Murphy, Layla, Gunner. Each name mattered. Each name was proof that Rocky's suffering had not ended only with Rocky. It had opened doors for others. Daniel did not tell Mia about the list until the day she found it lying beside Rocky's recovery crate. She read the names quietly. When she reached the bottom, her eyes shone. You're keeping record. Daniel leaned against the doorway. Someone should. Mia closed the notebook carefully. Yes, she said. Someone should. By March, Rocky could walk short distances without the sling. His gait was not perfect. It would never be perfect. But the pain that had haunted his body for more than a year had begun to loosen its grip. He slept deeper now. That was the change Daniel noticed most. In the early weeks after retirement, Rocky had slept like a sentry, one ear always half-raised, body ready to launch. Daniel had believed it was training. Some of it was, but some of it had been pain. Now, under the quiet rhythm of recovery, Rocky sometimes slept so heavily that Daniel had to watch his chest rise and fall just to reassure himself. The first time Rocky dreamed without whimpering, Daniel sat on the floor beside him and cried silently with one hand buried in the dog's fur. He would have denied it if asked. Mia saw from the hallway and did not ask. One evening, as snow began melting along the edges of the clinic parking lot, Naomi called with another update. Victor Langford had agreed to cooperate partially in exchange for limited consideration, a phrase Daniel hated so much he nearly crushed his coffee cup. But his cooperation confirmed what the documents already suggested. False clearances had been encouraged to meet contract deadlines, reduce treatment obligations, and avoid costly delays in retirement processing. Colonel Vail had not signed every order, but he had known enough. Others had known enough too. Naomi's voice remained professional, but fatigue lived beneath it. This will take months, she told Mia. Maybe years. Mia stood outside Riverstone, watching dirty snow melt into the gravel. The dogs don't have years. I know. Then make the medical reviews move faster than the prosecutions. Naomi was silent for a beat. Then she said, already doing it. Mia ended the call and looked across the parking lot where Daniel was helping Rocky into the truck using a ramp. Not lifting, not forcing, letting Rocky decide each step. The shepherd paused halfway up, glanced back at Mia, then continued forward. A small victory. The kind no court document would ever record. The kind that mattered anyway. That night, as Riverstone's lights glowed against the last stubborn snow of the season, Mia understood something she had not allowed herself to believe for 3 years. Leaving Fort Liberty had not meant failure. Keeping the documents had not been pointless. Silence had not been surrender, not when it had preserved the evidence until the world was finally ready to hear it. Rocky had not only exposed what happened to him, he had forced open a door everyone else had nailed shut. And now, across the country, more than 50 retired military dogs were being called back into the light, one medical review at a time. Spring arrived quietly in Montana. There was no dramatic moment when winter surrendered. No single sunrise that transformed the mountains. The change happened gradually. Snow retreated from fence lines. Streams ran louder. Patches of green returned to fields that had seemed lifeless only weeks earlier. And for the first time in a very long while, Daniel Hayes began noticing things beyond pain. The previous year had taught him how easily suffering could become routine. Rocky's slower steps, the hesitation before jumping into the truck, the careful way he lowered himself onto the floor. Daniel had convinced himself those things were simply signs of age. Now, standing on the porch of his small home outside Bozeman one cool April morning, he watched Rocky walk across the yard beneath a pale blue sky. The shepherd moved slowly, but he moved differently. The strain was gone. The guarded tension that had once lived in every step had disappeared. For a moment, Daniel simply stood there, coffee cooling in his hand, watching, remembering. The realization hit him unexpectedly. This was the first time in years he had seen Rocky walk without pain. The thought left him speechless. Behind him, the screen door opened. Mia Carter stepped onto the porch carrying a folder. She had stopped by after finishing an early shift at Riverstone. Her chestnut hair was tied back loosely, and the spring sunlight caught faint golden highlights that winter had hidden. The navy jacket she wore looked slightly too large for her. The sleeves rolled once at the wrists. Rocky immediately noticed her. The shepherd's ears lifted. His tail moved once, then twice. Not the restrained acknowledgement of a working dog, the greeting of a friend. Daniel smiled. Still your favorite. Mia looked down at Rocky. Don't tell him that. Rocky's tail moved again. Daniel laughed. Too late. The sound felt strange. Comfortable. Normal. Months earlier, normal had seemed impossible. Now it sat quietly beside him. Not perfect. Not dramatic. Simply present. Mia leaned against the porch railing. For a few moments they watched Rocky explore the yard. The shepherd stopped beside a patch of grass, sniffed carefully, then lowered himself into the sunlight. No hesitation. No visible discomfort. Just peace. Mia felt something tighten in her throat, because she knew exactly how much pain that dog had endured, and exactly how close he had come to spending the rest of his life that way. Daniel noticed her expression. You okay? She nodded. Eventually. Just thinking. About Rocky. About all of them. Daniel understood immediately. The investigation had continued growing. Every week brought new findings, new records, new names, new dogs. The numbers no longer shocked anyone. That was perhaps the saddest part. 54 evaluations became 58, then 61, then 63, and beyond the numbers existed real lives, real animals, real families, real damage. Yet there had also been victories. Many victories. Atlas completed spinal treatment and regained mobility. Moose underwent surgery and returned to chasing tennis balls despite Sarah Whitcomb's repeated objections regarding household furniture. Bella's rescue organization raised enough money for rehabilitation. Several retired handlers created support groups to help families navigate treatment options. Veterinary schools began reviewing retirement assessment procedures. Federal oversight committees opened hearings. The system had not changed completely, but it had started changing. And sometimes that was how lasting change began. Not with revolutions. With pressure. Applied consistently. By people unwilling to let go. Mia knew something about that. Across the country, news coverage slowly expanded. Most stories focused on the investigation. The contractors. The lawsuits. The hearings. The politics. But occasionally reporters found something more important. The dogs. When those stories aired, public support surged. Donations increased. Treatment funds expanded. Veterinary specialists volunteered services. People who had never heard of military working dog retirement programs suddenly cared. Daniel watched one of those reports late one evening. The segment featured Atlas, then Moose, then several others. At the end, the reporter showed Rocky walking through a rehabilitation exercise course. The footage lasted less than 30 seconds. Yet Daniel sat silently for several minutes afterward, because the report called Rocky something unexpected. Not a victim, not evidence. A catalyst. The word stayed with him. Catalyst. Something that causes change, without necessarily intending to. The description felt right. Rocky never wanted attention. He never wanted recognition. He simply existed. Loyal, patient, trusting, and somehow that had become enough to expose an entire system. Several weeks later, Naomi Pierce visited Bozeman again. The federal agent looked more tired than before. The investigation had consumed most of her year. Dark circles rested beneath her eyes. Yet her expression carried a quiet satisfaction. Progress. Real progress. She met Mia and Daniel at a small diner near downtown. The building smelled of coffee, grilled onions, and pie. Naomi arrived carrying a thick binder. Daniel immediately recognized government paperwork. Far too much government paperwork. Good news? He asked. Naomi sat down. Depends how much you enjoy reading legal findings. Not at all. Then yes. Mia smiled faintly. Naomi opened the binder. The pages contained summaries, charges, administrative actions, oversight recommendations, contract reviews, names, lots of names. Patriot Veterinary Assessment Services had formally dissolved. Multiple contracts were terminated. Several officials resigned. Others faced disciplinary review. Victor Langford agreed to cooperate extensively. Colonel Andrew Vale's investigation continued. The findings were still expanding. Most importantly, mandatory secondary orthopedic reviews would now be required for retiring military working dogs with specific risk factors. The policy wasn't perfect, but it existed. Because before Rocky, it hadn't. Daniel slowly closed the binder. All this from one X-ray. Naomi shook her head. No. Daniel frowned. What? The federal agent looked toward Mia. All this from someone refusing to destroy evidence. Silence followed. Not awkward silence. Meaningful silence. Mia looked away first. Praise always made her uncomfortable. Because praise implied completion. And she wasn't sure the work was complete. Not yet. Perhaps not ever. Naomi understood. Which was why she changed the subject. There's something else. Daniel immediately recognized the tone. What now? For the first time all afternoon, Naomi smiled. A real smile. Rare. Unexpected. The treatment fund. Mia looked up. What about it? The military-approved permanent expansion. Daniel blinked. What does that mean? It means dogs identified through this investigation will receive lifetime medical support for qualifying conditions. Neither Mia nor Daniel spoke. The significance took a moment to settle. Lifetime support. Not temporary. Not conditional. Permanent. For dozens of dogs. Possibly more. Rocky had changed policy. The realization felt almost unreal. A waitress interrupted briefly to refill coffee, then disappeared. The three sat quietly. Outside, people walked through warm spring sunlight. Inside, years of consequences continued unfolding. Eventually, Naomi stood. The investigation would continue. Paperwork would continue. Hearings would continue. Life would continue. But before leaving, she paused. Then looked directly at Mia. You know something? Mia raised an eyebrow. What? Naomi folded her arms. Most people would have deleted those files. The statement hung in the air. Because it was true. Keeping them had been risky, uncomfortable, pointless at times. There had been years when Mia herself wondered why she still had them. Years when moving on seemed easier. Years when forgetting seemed healthier. Yet she never deleted them. Never destroyed them. Never let them disappear. Why? The answer arrived before she could stop it. Because the dogs couldn't speak. Naomi nodded. As though that explained everything. Maybe it did. Several days later, Daniel invited Mia to his house for dinner. Nothing formal. Just food. Conversation. Normal life. The sort of thing neither of them practiced often. Rocky spent most of the evening moving between them. Checking on one. Then the other. Like an aging supervisor ensuring standards remained acceptable. After dinner, they carried coffee outside. The sun was beginning to set. Orange light spilled across the mountains. Birds moved through distant trees. The world felt unusually peaceful. Rocky lay in the grass nearby. Sleeping. Actually sleeping. Deeply, comfortably, without flinching, without tension, without pain. Daniel watched him for a long time, then quietly said, "I keep thinking about what would have happened if you hadn't noticed." Mia didn't answer immediately, because she had wondered the same thing. Many times. Finally she spoke. "We noticed." Daniel shook his head. "No." His eyes remained on Rocky. "You noticed." The shepherd stretched slightly in his sleep. A contented movement. Nothing more. Yet it seemed to answer the question itself. Mia followed Daniel's gaze. The evening breeze moved gently through the grass. For several moments neither spoke. Then Daniel smiled softly. "You know what the funny part is?" "What?" "Nobody paid attention to you when this started." Mia laughed. A genuine laugh. "Rare. That's not exactly funny." "It is now." Daniel pointed toward Rocky. "Federal investigations." Another finger. "National policy changes." Another. "Congressional hearings." Then finally. And it all started because one nurse paid attention to a dog everyone else thought was simply getting old. The statement settled quietly between them. Not dramatic. Just true. As the sun lowered beyond the Montana hills, Daniel looked toward Rocky one last time. The shepherd lay peacefully in the fading light, no longer carrying the invisible burden that had haunted him for years, no longer fighting pain every moment of every day, just resting, at peace. And Daniel understood something then. Rocky had spent his career saving lives, finding explosives, protecting soldiers, completing missions. Yet somehow his greatest act of service happened after retirement. By surviving, by enduring, by walking into Riverstone Veterinary Medical Center at exactly the right moment. Because his story had saved dozens of other dogs, maybe more. And Mia Carter, the quiet woman most people overlooked, had proven something equally important. Systems change because someone refuses to surrender the truth. Not always the loudest person, not always the most powerful person. Sometimes just one person willing to keep a file, keep a promise, and keep believing that the truth matters. Rocky opened one eye briefly, saw Daniel, saw Mia, then closed it again. The old shepherd returned to sleep beneath the warm spring sun. And for the first time in many years, everything was finally quiet. Sometimes God's greatest miracles do not arrive with thunder from heaven or signs written across the sky. Sometimes they arrive quietly, through ordinary people who refuse to let the truth disappear. Mia Carter never set out to change a system. She never wanted recognition, headlines, or praise. She simply refused to destroy what she knew was true. One woman chose integrity when silence would have been easier. One retired military dog named Rocky carried hidden pain without complaint. One loyal handler refused to stop fighting for the friend who had once fought for him. And through those small acts of courage, a truth that powerful people tried to bury was finally brought into the light. What began as a single X-ray in a small veterinary hospital became something far greater. Dozens of retired military dogs received the medical care they desperately needed. Policies were changed. Lives were improved. And animals who could not speak for themselves finally had someone willing to speak for them. That is often how God works. He does not always choose the loudest voice in the room. He does not always work through the most powerful people. Sometimes he works through ordinary men and women who quietly do the right thing when nobody is watching. Sometimes he places a burden on one person's heart because he knows that person will carry it when others turn away. In our daily lives, most of us will never uncover a national investigation or expose corruption inside a government system. But every day we face smaller choices that matter just as much. We choose whether to speak up when something feels wrong. We choose whether to help someone who cannot help themselves. We choose whether to stand for truth when it would be easier to stay silent. The lesson of Rocky's story is simple. Never underestimate the power of one act of compassion, one honest decision, or one person willing to protect the truth. You may never know how God plans to use your courage. A kind word may save someone from despair. A difficult truth may protect someone from harm. A single act of faith may change more lives than you ever imagine. If this story touched your heart, please take a moment to share it with someone who needs encouragement today. Leave a comment below and tell us where you're watching from. We'd love to see how far Rocky's story has traveled across the world. And if you enjoy stories of faith, hope, courage, and the extraordinary bond between people and animals, please subscribe to the channel and join our community. May God bless you and your family with peace during difficult days, strength when life feels heavy, wisdom when important choices appear before you, and hope that never fades. And may He watch over every loyal animal, every veteran, every caregiver, and every person carrying burdens that others cannot see. Thank you for spending this time with us. God bless you. Amen.